Oh, sorry. Oh, no. All right. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 118 of VR Roundtable. Here with everybody, joined by Anthony, Steve, and Gary, and myself. I'm finally back after a 2-week-long hiatus. I missed you guys. It's a good week to come back to, that's for sure. This has been a crazy week at GDC, and we're really excited to get into this one. I think this is going to be a super duper fun episode. So I guess, first of all, how are you doing, Steve?
I'm doing very good. Yeah, it was a fun week. I like, and we're going to get into the announcements and stuff and how you feel about them, but there was sort of an air of excitement, going in on Monday and Tuesday and knowing that something was coming and, it just feels different. And, I like that excitement when that stuff happens,
Yeah, it's been a long time since we had that level of excitement. How about you, Gary? How are you doing?
Oh, pretty good, yeah. Just a quick reminder to everyone heading down to EGX Res on April the 6th. And if anybody would like to meet up for a beer or something, or just to play some VR while we're down there, hopefully there'll be some VR there. That's sort of what I'm holding out hope for. But I know that with it being an indie kind of event, there's not too much VR generally down there, but either way, it'd be good to talk to some of the community while I'm there. So anybody heading down there, hit me up on Twitter at ReckonerVR.
Cool, awesome. I love that. I wish I could go to that event. Too bad I'm on the other side of the world.
I'm flying to Ireland, and me and Gary were trying to make it so that I could pop off over there to England for the weekend, but I had a slight change of plans and can't make it, but I hope to make the next one.
Awesome. Somehow I'd like to make one at some point in time. We'll see how that could ever happen. And then, Anthony, how are you this week? You went to GDC. You're our person everyone's jealous of. I've been jealous of you the entire week watching your shows.
Yeah, it's awesome, for it to all be over now and kind of calm me down. And, I'm still finding out things that have happened over the week that because it's so chaotic when you're there at GDC and you're worried about going to your hotel and all these other things. And so there's so many little announcements that I kind of missed along the way. And so I'm kind of doubling back and looking at all these little games and things that kind of got buried under all these stories.
Yeah, definitely. I know whenever I went to conventions and I came back, I was like, what is all this stuff that was there and I didn't see? Damn it. Just a quick announcement for everyone as well. I'm going to be heading to PAX East this week. So if anyone of the audience is heading there, maybe we can meet up and try out Oculus Quest or Rift S or anything. And speaking of those things, we should get into the GDC announcements of Rift S. This was a big one. I really didn't think this was going to happen at first, at the start of the convention. I thought it was just a rumor that everyone was hype behind, and then it just wouldn't happen and everyone would be disappointed, but thankfully it did happen. I figured we could do a quick roundtable about our initial impressions of the headset. I know personally for me, I was super disappointed initially, and so was everyone on my VR development team. We were all like, man, this thing is worse in every way. What's going on here? There's some slight improvements, but overall, we were pretty disappointed initially. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts. I guess we can maybe head to Gary first on this one.
Yeah. So I'm not a million miles away. I think as an enthusiast, you wanted a lot more. And I think from the rumors that were coming out, the weeks and the months leading up to this announcement, we had sort of impressions how these rumors were, how it would be a single screen, fixed IPD with only software adjustment, and some other things that were coming out. And it's not entirely unexpected. I think the product that we're left with is not entirely unexpected. But that initial announcement as an enthusiast is, it was a little bit disappointing, because at the back of your mind, you're always thinking, they're going to pull it out of the bag. They're going to give us something that we all want as enthusiasts. But the Rift S is not that product. We've got a lot more to say on it, but yeah, initial announcements I suppose were a little bit disappointing for me.
Yeah, how about you, Steve? What were your impressions?
Very close to Gary. It was we we knew going into it that it wasn't going to be Rift 2. We knew that it was going to be a sort of a evolutionary product. So I guess the big thing for me, as we'll get into details, but the big thing I think is that it was sort of hyped, like if you look at, like, Upload was tweeting, everyone's like, we got a big announcement Wednesday morning that you don't want to miss. Like, they kind of, I fell for the hype, I guess. Like, I kind of said, okay, or maybe this is going to be a little something more. This is going to be something bigger than it really is. And, it was just sort of what we expected. Now, the details are different, but the overall gist and tone of what the Rift S is sort of what we expected. It's the details here and there that maybe in some aspects weren't what we were expecting. In other aspects, they did things that are better that we weren't expecting as well. So the devil's in the details here, but I think overall at a high level, it is sort of aiming for what we were expecting the device to be.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Anthony, how about you? Because you were probably like heading to GDC, or you were there and then this announcement dropped. How did that feel?
Yeah, well, I was in my hotel room at 8 a.m. Pacific time is when the announcement came out, and GDC doesn't really get going until like 10, basically. But I mean, you want to be there at like 9:20 or something. But it was 8 a.m., so I was still in my hotel room, and waiting for this announcement to come. And I remember like hitting the refresh on Upload VR, and I saw 1440p, and I was like, "What? 1440?" That was the biggest thing that threw me off. I was like, I could have never imagined it would be such a marginal increase in resolution. I understand it now. I absolutely understand it now. But at the time, I was like, "What? You got to be kidding me!" And then also looking at the picture of it, and it just looks so un-Oculus-like, So I was pretty shocked by all of it.
Yeah, I get that. Like, I guess a lot of people talk about this. It looks like a Windows MR headset, and then the Windows MR headsets now look like Rifts. It's like, what's going on here? The industry's all shaken up by this. But I guess we can go over one by one some of the different aspects of the Rift S and give our opinions on them, because there's a lot to talk about this thing. A lot of the interesting design decisions that Oculus made about the headset. So I was thinking first maybe we could talk about some of the things that are overall pretty positive. Maybe we could talk about comfort first. So the Rift S uses a halo strap design similar to the PSVR, which I think is really good. Like, just, we all have PSVR. I think that's the most comfortable headset for really everyone who tries VR. At least in my friend group, everyone's like, wow, PSVR is super comfortable and nice. And, the Rift has been feeling less comfortable the more I've been playing PSVR, because Rift was always like the super comfortable headset, but I think it's kind of been surpassed by some headsets lately. So it uses a cool halo strap design, and I'm excited about that. I think that is a good thing. So we can head around the round table. We can start with Gary again. What do you think about the comfort of this headset?
Well, yeah, having not tried it, I assume it's going to be sort of similar to the PSVR. The one difference with this headset that has been designed by Lenovo, they do have the Halo thing, but they've also got a strap along the top, which some people cite as saying like that could make a difference in terms of comfort as well. I've always been a big fan of the Oculus Rift in terms of comfort, because it's been described in this way by numerous people about how it's like a baseball cap, kind of, you can place it on and off your head very easily, and that's not really the case of the PSVR. It takes a little bit more effort to put the PSVR on, but once it's on, I agree. I think it's far more comfortable overall, at least for sort of long gaming sessions and that kind of stuff. But the Oculus Rift, I do miss that. I've got to say, I like the very quick, easy on and easy off aspect of the Rift, which this headset probably won't have quite so much. But yeah, comfort, I suppose the most important thing is comfort in long periods of time. So I guess overall, I'm sort of, I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily the right or the wrong decision. I'm sort of fall squarely in the middle with that. I think in terms of comfort, it's probably beneficial for more people overall. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Steve?
I think it's probably pretty good. Now, I'm just speaking personally, I'm in the camp that I guess I prefer my VR headsets to hug my face a little more, because when I'm playing a game and if I jerk my head side to side, I notice like if on the PlayStation VR and on the Odysseys, and I'm not going to say the Rift is like the Odyssey, we know it'll be different, but when they kind of float in front of your face rather than make contact, you can get a little bit of movement there. So I prefer, I've modded my Odyssey with the Velcro strap to actually bring it in and sort of emulate the Rift CV1 or the Oculus CV1. And so I think I would prefer it to, I guess, maintain what the CV1 did. But if I think bigger for everybody else, I think this is probably a overall improvement. I know a lot of people complained by how the CV1 fit. I know a lot of people have the red ring around the face, ironically in the shape sort of as the Oculus logo. So all in all, I think that is an improvement. I think comfort matters greatly. I think friction matters greatly. And this is a step up.
Yeah. And then Anthony, you're our resident trier of the Rift S. You actually had it on your face. How was the comfort for you?
Yeah, the comfort, I mean, I don't know if I should say like the comfort or the tracking is the best feature of the thing, but they're like neck and neck, and the comfort was really awesome. It really is. Now, the thing is, you see pictures of it and it looks like the face gasket is foam, but there's also a padding that, you know, does your forehead and then also back here. And that doesn't look kind of like foam. It looks more like a material, but I remember it when I was there, it seemed like it was foam, and it seemed like it was the most soft, fluffy foam you could imagine, and it really felt very good on my head. I've always kind of had some problems with the regular standard Rift. Like, it's never been a super comfortable headset for me for whatever reason. Like, one of the things I've said about it is it kind of seems like it's pinching on the sides of my head just a little bit. And like, I'll play my Oculus Rift for about 45 minutes or so, and it's fine up until about that point. But then the comfort for me starts to kind of wear me down a little bit, and I kind of want to come out of it a little bit earlier than maybe I need to. And in some ways, I'm tempted to run out there and go get a Rift S, actually, because just from a pure comfort standpoint, just for that reason alone, it could actually be worth it.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, because like that was really exciting for me. I know especially the Rift is kind of hard if you're demoing for a lot of people. You have to keep readjusting like everything, and I think that takes longer maybe than the Sony style design that Oculus now has as well. Do we want to touch on tracking for a minute maybe, because that's another positive before we get to things that are a little more here or there?
Yeah, it's a positive for some people, but also not necessarily for everybody. I think in terms of tracking, I've never had a big problem with tracking on, like, when I tried the Odyssey. This is the one thing. I had a couple of complaints about the Odyssey, but not too many. And the tracking definitely wasn't one of those things. So inside out tracking is just the way it's going to be in terms of going forward, I think. Anyway, the wider VR industry is probably going more towards that. So tracking on this, a lot of people will still insist they want the outside in tracking, which will give the benefit overall, I suppose. But there's zero problems. I had, not zero, 95% no problems at all with the Windows mixed reality headsets when I tried it. And I think with the Rift S, having this method is not necessarily a bad thing overall. And I'll talk about this later on, about how I think this is the right decision overall for them to make, or any manufacturer of VR to make in the long run. But there is a concern, I suppose, from some people, and this is one of the, not the main complaint, but I think it's definitely in the minds of a lot of people that have been using VR since day one and are used to outside in tracking, and have to get this mindset that this will not necessarily give them quite so accurate performance in games, but it will give it good enough. And I think that's the important thing. It's good enough.
Yeah, what do you think, Steve?
Well, we said, going way, way back in the day, and I believe I'm sure we were chastised for it in the comments and such, but we've said pretty much since before Windows MR hit the market, but when we knew about them, that inside out tracking was going to be what the mainstream moves to. You can't sell a device and expect any sort of mass adoption and require people to put sensors up on the wall, require people to go out and buy Anatech USB cards and try to manage multiple USB controllers in their PC. You just can't expect mass adoption doing that. So, this is sort of the obvious. This is almost a foregone conclusion. We've seen it now with HTC, the Cosmos, which they've not said, but I sort of think the Cosmos is going to be a lot like the Rift S is going to be the successor or the phased out replacement to the Vive. Again, I don't know. I don't have any inside info there, but I see this as sort of the evolution. What I would like to see, and Nate Mitchell mentioned it, but I don't know, what the odds of them actually truly implementing it are. But Nate Mitchell mentioned sort of augmenting it for existing Rift consumers, augmenting it if you already have sensors on the wall, or if you're a consumer and you want to take it to the next step, having the ability to have outboard sensors to perfect your room scale, your 360 tracking should be an option. But I think sort of the default out of the box, what most consumers aim for, I think this inside out tracking is perfect because people don't have to, it's the easier setup and portability. Like, ever since I got the Odyssey, I've been thinking, the next laptop I get for work or something, like whether I buy external GPU or try to figure out a way to get a gaming laptop or something, because I can take a laptop and an inside out headset and I can go anywhere with it. Like when I travel on business, I could be in my hotel room playing Oculus Rift S. I know some people say that's what Quest is for and all that, but that's a different discussion. All in all, so I think the inside out tracking is, in a way, for those of us enthusiasts that have had sensors on our walls. In this room here, I have a pretty big room. I have 4 sensors. For me, performance wise, I'm going to see a degradation in some aspects. But for all the new buyers, and when I move out of this room, I'm eventually going to buy a new house, something, and I'll take these sensors off the wall. And when I set up in whatever new room I'm going into, it'll be an improvement, and I'll be glad that they moved to inside out tracking. So, I guess if we're keeping score here on these points, it's now 2 points pro on the Rift S between the comfort and the tracking. So I think it's the right step. I just would, and to repeat myself, I know, but I would like to see them sort of unlock or do whatever they need to do for existing consumers that move to the Rift S to be able to utilize the sensors they already have.
Yeah, it's just that one game, like Lone Echo Arena is like the one game that people are all like upset about, because that's the only game I can think of where I'm back here for like 20 seconds or something. I don't know. Anthony, what do you think about the tracking? I'm sure it was really nice.
Yeah, I thought the tracking was pinpoint accurate, and I was deliberately trying to move my controller into weird positions. Now, I understand there's basically like 2 minor blind spots. It's kind of like right in front of the headset itself. There's a blind spot there, and then there's like another blind spot, a small blind spot behind you, kind of. But the only downside I really see, because they put that camera on the top specifically for Echo Arena and Echo Combat, and that's why they put that extra 5th camera up there, is to add that extra tracking volume. And I think, honestly, most Windows mixed reality people will say that the times that you notice the tracking having problems is so infrequent that it's a non-factor. And then I think when you go to this one, it's even more of a non-factor. Like it's going to be even smaller of a circumstances that you'll ever notice these problems. The only real negative I see is lighting. You're gonna you need to have enough lights where you can like read a book or read some words out of a book. You need that much lighting apparently. And there's some people that like to play straight darkness. They want to be in a dark room. They don't want any light leaking in. Now, here's the good news. Your regular Rift, you could look down and see your feet. You know, there was a lot of light gap in the regular Rift. This one has very little light leakage at all, if any. And there's good news in that regard as well. We'll get to that a little bit later, like when we talk about pass-through and stuff. But the lighting thing is maybe one little minor issue, but the tracking seems flawless, man. This is the future. Like let's move forward. It's going to seem almost backwards with Valve and other companies to still continue with external tracking.
Yeah, it's so easy to set up ever since I got the Odyssey. And like, you know, this looks like infinitely more tracking volume than the Odyssey. Because even when I'm playing Beat Saber, like I lose tracking on the Odyssey currently when they're out to my side. So, I mean, you know, this sounds great. I think, like you said, this is where the industry just needs to go. I think people need to get over these like 0.0001% of times when their controller's like behind them for like more than 5 seconds or something. It's like never really going to be an issue as long as with Rift S I can hold up like a scope to my face and it doesn't lose tracking. Like on Windows MR, I'll be happy, because that's like my biggest annoyance when I'm trying to play Pavlov, and I can't. I can't play Pavlov in like the Odyssey or anything.
Just
like that.
Just on that point quickly before we move on, because I didn't try it when I had my Odyssey. I didn't try any of these bow games, you know, and that's one of the concerns that I have with these inside-out tracking headsets. Where if you want to do a bow and arrow kind of game, is that a problem or is it not really a problem? I don't know, because I meant to make a point of trying these when I owned a Windows Mixed Reality, but I didn't, unfortunately. So I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that.
Well, I'm concerned about it. Oops, I screwed up. Anthony, I think you mentioned, maybe you actually experienced it, but I am concerned pulling it up. I don't see how, as well as Oculus thought out the inside out and how they evolved it past Windows MR. If you look at the placement of the front cameras, they're sort of down low. If you look at the side cameras, they're down low and at an angle. I've always complained that the two big areas of tracking insufficiency that I've noticed with the Windows MR were when you bring it close to your face. So think Creed when you're blocking. Think, as Chris mentioned, in Pavlov when you're sniping or you're looking down the scope. The other issue I personally notice a lot is when I'm playing a game like Skyrim. If I hold my hands down, if like I'm not in a battle in Skyrim and I'm just walking from point A to point B, I'll tend to relax my hands and let them kind of just go down by my side. When that happens, the cameras lose track. And even though I'm only navigating with a thumbstick, my hands will just kind of float away sometimes. It's almost like when they lose tracking, instead of just holding it and fixing it at the last known position, which I do know Windows MR does sometimes, or most of the time, occasionally it's like it loses the last known position as well, and my hands will just float off into abyss. And that's very jarring. That's very, that's a problem. So I think Oculus has addressed that particular issue with the way the cameras are pointed. And you can clearly see that was a concern that they wanted to address. The bringing it close to your face, I don't know how you solve that. There's no amount of camera in the HMD that is going to fix that. So maybe they have some tricks with software, or maybe that's going to be a glaring and jarring problem with this inside-out tracking. So when I say that I think the tracking is a positive and is a win for the Rift S, I'm speaking not for my own personal perspective, because I do think the sensors on the walls, the base stations in the Vive ecosystem, I think those from a pure performance perspective are without question better. When I say it's better in this sense in the Rift S, I'm more referring to the adopter, the consumer that's just getting into VR, or I think it's the best performance isn't always best for the widest audience. And Oculus's clear go, and I know we'll discuss this, but their clear go is to try to knock down barriers to achieve that, to get more people into VR. Now, I think there's some mixed messaging there, and I don't agree with everything they've done. That there's a sort of a conflict there, and we'll get into that later. So, back to you, Chris.
All right. One
last point I just want to make real quick regarding their, like, they have these two known blind spots, right? and they know exactly where those blind spots are, and they know exactly what the volume of those blind spots are. They also know about human anatomy and bone structure and the way our arms move. And with predictive software, I think this is going to be fine, man. I really believe this is like going to be a real non-issue. I think there may be one game here or there where when you're doing this one very specific thing, but other than that, I really think this is going to be a non-issue.
Yeah. You're right, and largely it is a non-issue 99% of the time. Even with Windows MR, which I'm assuming is very inferior, it's not a problem 99% of the time. But there are occasions, like when I was playing what's the game that recently came out that's like Skyrim? Drawing a blank.
Shadow Legend.
Shadow Legend.
Yeah, Shadow Legend. When I'm playing Shadow Legend and the archery, like I had to sort of modify where I pull my hand back just a little bit. Like I could still play it, could still shoot the arrow, but it wasn't a just do it naturally. Like it was like an extra process I had to run it in my mind. When I use the bow, I got to kind of do it a little bit different because the camera's going to lose it. And did you try, Anthony? Did you I'm sure the games that they offered you in the Rift S maybe didn't allow for this necessarily or naturally occur for it, but did you put your hands up close to your face for any reason? I'm assuming there was nothing archery based that you tried, but did you experience it?
Yeah, there wasn't anything archery that I tried, but I was putting my hands all over the place because that was the first thing that I wanted to do is like let me see if this thing is really going to work. And so I was putting my hands all over the place. And you know, when you move your hand around, and if you did have a tracking problem, it's like you see your controller and then it kind of like fades off, or there's like a hitch to it or whatever. I noticed none of that whatsoever. So that's why when I came out of the demo, I was like, wow, tracking was flawless. Like this really is the future. Okay, I'm sold. Everything should be. I mean, not everybody has this technology, and I'm sure Facebook spent a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of engineers figuring this thing out and getting it even better than it's ever been before. This is kind of like next generation inside out tracking. And it's one of the reasons why I'd really like to see a legit Windows Mixed Reality 2.0, where they also have kind of a next generation one as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's super overdue, I feel like, for Windows MR, especially with all the new stuff we can talk about a little bit later on in the show. I just want to bring up, I remember when the Rift first came out, it was so easy to set up, and like, that was always the thing, because with the lighthouses and everything, I know with the Vive I had to like set it up across the room, but the Rift didn't have touch yet. It had one camera you just plopped on your desk and then you put on your headset, and like that was fine. That was totally fine. But then it felt like once touch came out, like suddenly, oh man, it's a pain. It's a real pain, and it's especially a pain like the more you do it, it feels like the more you have to move rooms, like it just ends up sucking a lot.
Well,
I know
that's
like,
a particular pain point for you because you're in a new room every week.
Yeah, exactly.
There was this interview that I watched from 2014. It just popped up on my YouTube feed last week, and this made me think of this actually about they were demoing the Crescent Bay prototype from Oculus. This is obviously before the CV1 release, and Palmer Luckey was saying, Norm, this is a tested video. So Norm was interviewing Palmer Luckey, and he was just saying Rift is a seated experience. And he was adamant that this is how it needs to be played. It's a seated experience. And the transition between the technology they were using, because Crescent Bay used this outside-in tracking in order to give some level of sort of positional tracking, but they still insisted it was a seated experience. And then HTC came out with the Vive and everything had to change. This is without a doubt, the Constellation tracking is without a doubt a reaction to HTC Vive, and in order to fulfill room scale, what they're doing with the Rift S, in my opinion, is better overall. And we'll get onto this later, that Steve mentioned, for the overall consumer, not necessarily for enthusiasts, but it's better overall for various consumers.
Yeah, definitely. We're working on a snowball game that I can't talk too much about. My little team that who knows if it'll ever come out, but we bring it to campus to test every week, and like we've been bringing it Rifts and Vives, and it's just such a pain. Like it takes us like a half hour to get everything set up with the software and then like the sensors, and I'm like, guys, did you bring USB extenders? We're like, no. I'm like, oh no. Like we need 360. So this is just gonna be fantastic. I'm really excited about the tracking, and I hope everyone will come around to it once they try it. I think it's just going to be absolutely fine. I guess we can get to some of the more wishy-washy things maybe. Do we want to talk about the screen now? The screen will be interesting. Yeah, it's a big one. I think we can go in the same order. Gary, do you want to start us off with the screen? It's a single LCD that's 2560 by 1440. It's clocked at 80 hertz. Take us away.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot to say on this. I suppose this is one of the main points of contention when this was announced. Not necessarily the wider community, but enthusiasts, which is the place where I pay most attention to. This is a big deal. The LCD panel. Okay, so I recently tried the Pimax. I don't know if I mentioned that on the show or not, but last week I dived in far too long on the Pimax. It was just a real, I went very in depth in my impressions of the Pimax. But the fact is that the Pimax also uses an LCD screen, which is the Pimax 5K Plus is 1440p as well. And I mentioned how great I thought that screen looked. And I'm not taking anything away. I think that the LCD panel at that resolution is still not what a lot of people were expecting. Of course, it wasn't. When you hear about the Quest being 1600 vertical pixels, and then this headset is 1440 vertical pixels, it doesn't sound good on paper. But it uses LCD, so it's got the RGB stripe pattern of subpixel arrangement, so that can give a better overall resolution. As I think I witnessed in the Pimax, I was very impressed with the resolution of that headset. Not taking into account the wider field of view, I'm just talking about sort of like the vertical resolution of that headset. The most confusing thing is the last thing you said there, Chris, the 80 hertz. Now, I think this is probably one of the main points of contention that people have been talking about this past week, and I think rightfully so. This seems to point squarely to the fact that they've used panels from the Oculus Go in order to make this headset. It's a single screen. It's not two separate screens. And when Tested interviewed Nate Mitchell, he was talking about how this could be used as like the reason he gave for this is because then the same spec PC that they had at the original launch of the Oculus Rift could be used for this. They're not having to up the spec because the frames per second are not necessarily required. And I don't buy that. I don't think that's the case. I don't understand why they would all of a sudden go down to 80 hertz when they've been banging away at 90 hertz for so long. It doesn't make sense as an enthusiast. I think even a casual user for VR looking at the spec sheet of all of these things will be turned off by that 80 hertz figure. And I'm not saying that I'd notice a difference. I probably wouldn't, and it's probably fine. I've not tried it. But I think that figure alone is a point of contention more than the resolution, more than the LCD panel for me personally. I'll hold judgment overall, but I think that's a big deal, honestly.
Yeah, Steve, what do you think?
Well, on the screen as a whole, so there's, I guess I'll focus on the 80 hertz, like Gary. I agree. This is the Go screen. I think we've had people sort of basically confirm it. It's not, Oculus did not go out of their way to source another LCD 2560 by 1440 panel. Like they're just they've already bought them. They have them with the Go. I'm not convinced that it's necessarily extra Go panels they had laying around. I just think they went back to the same supplier and bought more. Maybe they negotiated higher volume and got a better price. I don't know. Supply chain is an interesting aspect, and it's something that I think most people don't think about when they think about how a company can develop a product, in this case, a VR headset. It's not like the engineers sit in a room and say, okay, we're going to make this decision, and we've just designed a headset. No, what they do is they have to work with the people on the supply chain team, and they have to say, what can we go buy? Like you don't say, I'm going to make a VR headset with this resolution. You find out what's on the market that you can buy, and then you make a headset based on the products, the components that you can afford to buy, put them together, then you design around those constraints. And that's clearly what's happening here. The Rift S is using the Go LCD. Now, in the Go, the refresh rate was 60 hertz and 72 hertz in some content when they enabled it. I know that I can distinctly see when it goes to 72 hertz because 60 hertz, you see the flashing, you see the sort of the strobing effect. It's very apparent on bright scenes. So what I think they've done, now I don't know the native refresh rate of this display. It could be a 72 hertz display that they've overclocked to 80 hertz, or maybe it's always been an 80 hertz display from day one and they just clocked it at 72 and 60 hertz in the Go, per the application, depending on the load of the software at the time. So that's it. Like, this is the Go display. Now, unlike you, Gary, I'm not necessarily convinced that the 80 hertz is a problem. We've always, you did say, we've always been told that got to hit 90 hertz, got to hit 90 hertz, got to hit 90 hertz.
Just to clarify, I'm sorry to interrupt, Steve. Just on a personal level, I don't think it will be a problem. I don't know if I would notice the difference. I'm only talking on the spec sheet when people look at this on a spec sheet where I feel it could be perceived as a problem.
Yes, I think, and that's sort of the problem with the Rift S as a whole, and I'll try to come back to that later. But yes, when you look at, this headset's 90 hertz, this one's 80 hertz, that is a problem when you're reading bullet points. But I think the actual user experience, I believe Oculus, when they say that most people don't notice or it goes unnoticed, that's not to say there's a difference. There's a difference in saying this is unnoticed or indistinguishable. Like, unnoticed just means you could notice the difference between 80 and 90 hertz. You just don't, like, unless you're looking for it or focusing on it. So for me, the 80 hertz display isn't necessarily a problem in any way. I do agree with you in that tested video when Nate kind of said, well, we went to 80 hertz to keep the min spec. I'm calling BS on that, because I think they went to 80 hertz because that's what the supply chain sourced. That's the screens that they could buy at the price they wanted to buy, and or they had a surplus of due to Go manufacturing. Interestingly, and I'm not going to make a big point about it, I couldn't get tons of clarity, but Sebastian mentioned that one of the reps told him that the render target for the Rift S is the same as the CV1. Now, that's not to say that the resolution driving the display is the same resolution as a CV1, but the render target of the game in Oculus, you don't have access to the tools in the same way you do in Steam VR. In Steam VR, you go in, you set your super sampling, it'll tell you right there on the screen what your render target is. You don't necessarily see that on the Oculus side. But if that's true, and David Haney briefly touched on it in a comment, I couldn't get him to elaborate. Either he doesn't know or he doesn't want to say, because we know he's a fanboy, he doesn't want to say anything bad about Oculus. But if that's true, and if the render target for a game running on the Oculus Rift is the same as the render target for a CV1, then you don't need to lower the refresh rate to maintain the same specification. That to me suggests that what Nate Mitchell said was just PR speak, or, and this is likely the case, I think, they're going to, in early days of the Rift S, they just haven't, the Oculus software isn't mature enough to detect a Rift S and say, okay, we're going to change the render target for it. For now, as we come out of the gate, we're going to keep the same render target as CV1. So I don't want to get too technical there, and I hope what I was saying made sense, but there are rumors out there and some corroboration that the CV1 render target is being used on the Rift S, and I don't know if that's a long-term plan or not.
Yeah, I know. A quick note on that is Tyrell Woods said he doesn't think that's real because they also moved to DisplayPort. So that's, good to know as well. Like they moved to a DisplayPort connection. So potentially that should mean that there's at least the capability to drive the display natively, you'd think.
You don't have to change. So the render target is that's your super sampling. If I do 2.0 super sampling, that my render target is twice but what's coming down the DisplayPort lane or the HDMI lane isn't twice. You're still driving the panel at its native resolution as per the hardware in the device. So the render target, the render target is just what the game is rendering at, not the it's effectively super sampling and undersampling. We know every headset or most headsets oversample above native to allow for correction in the distortion profiles, so that in the center of the lens you're at about a 1-to-1 pixel density. That's my point here, is that if they're doing the same as the CV1, then how can you maintain, assuming the distortion profiles may be the same, maybe similar? So I think, I just think there's more information, something to pay attention there, because if they're keeping the same target, they didn't need to lower to 80 hertz to keep the same spec is ultimately my biggest point.
In effect, what you're saying is that they're undersampling to the native resolution of the headset overall, based on everything that we're hearing. And I'd, just very quickly before Anthony gives his impressions, on the Oculus Go, because a lot of the reason that we're talking about this with the Oculus Go is that we think it probably uses the same screen, and I don't think it's a fair judgment to just think that we're going to get the same experience in the Oculus Go and the Rift S, because a lot of games were undersampled. This is the point that we need to hit on as well. A lot of games in Oculus Go were undersampled in order to maintain performance. So I think the overall experience and the overall fidelity in the Rift S will also be a benefit over the Oculus Go, which you could do get an approximation of what you're going to get in the Rift S based on the Oculus Go. But there's a lot of that. And I hadn't heard that, Steve. I didn't know that the render target was lower in the Rift S or the same as the original Rift, even in spite of the high resolution screen in the Rift S.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. If you just focus on render target, still Rift has the best resolution out of Quest and Go, because they both have a lower render target for most apps. So even though the screen might be better or higher resolution on the Quest, you'll still get more clarity from something like the Rift S. All right, Anthony, give us the rundown of what you thought of the Rift S screen.
Okay, so are we talking mostly here about the 80 hertz?
Let's talk all of it.
Okay.
Yep. And then come back, because I got some things on the RGB aspect of it. So go ahead and give your full display.
Well, one thing I want to say real quick about the Go screen, because lots of places are saying that this is the Go screen, right? But Nate Mitchell, straight out of his mouth, I went back to the tested video last night, and right at the 4-minute mark of that tested video, Norm is interviewing Nate Mitchell, and I wrote down his exact quote. His exact quote is, "It's actually very similar to the LCD screen that's in Go. It's a fast switch LCD." That is exactly what he said. He said, actually very similar. Now, if it's the exact Go screen, would he say that in an interview that would be public? Isn't that misinformation, or did maybe he just slip up, or I mean, I wish we could get more clarification on this, because Steve, I understand your conspiracy theory, and normally I am a conspiracy theorist as well. And
Upload has reported that it's the same, unless they're wrong. They've got the information, and Carmack has come out to say that that they would have used this screen in the Quest had they had this screen and had this technology available when the Quest started development.
Okay. Well, I mean, you can go back to the tested video. He does say it's actually very similar. And if it was the exact same screen, why wouldn't he just say it's actually the same screen as the Go? Why wouldn't he say that unless it sounds bad or something? I don't know. But anyway, just wanted to mention that real quick. The 80 hertz thing is interesting from a number of angles. Okay. Obviously, it looks bad on paper. You look at it, because I remember back in the Pimax days, when we were talking about, oh yeah, Pimax can't seem to get it up to 90 hertz, and we kind of would make jokes about that and stuff. And now it's come to Oculus, this 80 hertz thing. There's a way we can spin it in a good way, right? It's 10 frames less per second, which means that the chances of you going into reprojection have been slightly dropped, right? A little bit. And so those of us, if you have, say, a 1070 compared to a 1080, maybe, I mean, trying to spin this in a slightly positive way, maybe our games could run just a teeny weensy bit better dropping down to this 80 hertz. Now, the flip side of that, though, is 80 hertz, maybe in a 15-minute, 25-minute demo, you notice no difference whatsoever. But maybe if you're playing it for an hour and a half, maybe you have a little bit of an additional eye strain or a little bit of additional fatigue. Another thing to remember at the 80 hertz. As far as the screen, like 1440p and all of that, people in a lot of reviews everywhere, people are saying, oh yeah, it's an added, it's an increase in resolution. I personally feel like that increase in resolution is so minimal, it's almost not even worth discussing. Now, if we talk about the subpixels, that's a different ballgame. And if you want to talk about the clarity of words on the screen and menus and like boxes and just your typical, like the clarity, the detail, the focus with the RGB stripe and the subpixels, yeah, you'll notice that. You will notice that. The resolution bump, I think it's so minuscule. I mean, even people that talk about like Vive Pro and Samsung Odyssey, I can see maybe they can notice a little bit of a resolution bump. This resolution bump, I think, is so minor. I think if you notice it, I think it's placebo.
You've tried this, Anthony. So this is the thing, and this is one of the things I want to knuckle down in. Actually, like, you've tried the Rift S, and I know it's difficult. You're in a public arena and you're trying it. You're trying to take in so many different things about this headset. But the resolution for me, okay. So when I tried the Pimax, which is a 1440p screen, exactly the same. I know it's not necessarily exactly the same. You've got different wider field of view, and the resolution is not identical on the horizontal as it is on the vertical or anything like that. But I noticed a big difference. That was one of the main differences I noticed by going to the 1440p screen, in spite of it being LCD. Did you not notice? So when you tried the Rift S, did it look to you pretty much like a Rift?
Pretty much. One thing I said in my other show is that all these impressions that you're getting from everybody at GDC, it's very difficult because, first of all, you're waiting in a 2.5 hour line or a 3 hour line or a 2 hour line or something like that, right? To get a 10-minute demo if you're lucky. And unless you're waiting in line and you decide beforehand, you know what, during this 10-minute demo, I'm not going to look at anything except the black levels. That's all I'm going to look for is the black levels, so I can figure out the black levels, or SDE, or a slight resolution bump, or is the FO, like whatever the aspect is, you would almost have to go into the demo knowing that this is the number one thing I'm looking for, and I'm not going to worry about the fact that I'm playing Dead and Buried 2 or Stormland or whatever. I'm just looking at this one thing. Then sure, maybe you can kind of notice these things, but I don't know how many people really did that, because I know after standing in line for 2.5 hours, I'm trying to look at Dead and Buried 2. I'm trying to look at all these different things, and you got people waiting for you. I mean, waiting to get used to the headset. You got the person that's assisting you, and they're telling you all these different things as well. And then you're also like giving them your phone and telling them to take footage of you and all that. So there's a lot of things going on. But to me, it basically looked the same as Rift for the most part. What I did notice the reduction in God rays. I don't know if we're going to go into God rays right now, but like when we got into in certain scenes, I did kind of notice a reduction in glare as far as that goes. But unfortunately, another aspect too is like, you'd love to have one of these headsets for about 3 or 4 hours that you could test with any game you wanted, because then you could put a background where it's just a black background with a white title screen, and you could do a A/B comparison and know the God rays. And we were limited to the demos that they gave us, and the demos were just automatically running. It wasn't even like you could back out of the demo and go into a menu screen or something like that. The demo was running and you just had to roll with it. So I didn't notice a major difference in any way, really.
I think when you get more time with it, and when you get one at home, if you get one for your home, I don't want to jump ahead, but I think you'll notice, you'll start to notice the difference. I'm showing an image now. Someone posted this on Reddit earlier, and I'd meant to do the same thing in this video anyways, but I'm showing an image that shows the difference between Pentile and RGB. And this is essentially the difference that we're going to be seeing with from coming from the OG Rift to the Rift S. What you'll notice with the Pentile is because every pixel doesn't have every color. It's more of a comparison, less about the arrangement and more about each pixel with the LCD has the R, the G, and the B, the red, the blue, and the green. Whereas on the Pentile, not every pixel has the red, blue, and green. Sometimes it's referred to as a RGBG, meaning every pixel has green, and then every other pixel has blue and red. And what that does is if you look in the Instagram icon, and I notice this all day looking when I use the Odyssey headset, look at the red on the Pentile side of the Instagram icon there. The red almost looks like it's half resolution. And it effectively is, because the red subpixel is only in every other pixel. So when you're showing reds, oranges, browns, you are effectively at a lower resolution than you are on the LCD because it can light every pixel. So that's what you have to consider. And that's why LCD, just looking at it in terms of pixels and resolution, that is why RGB looks better. Now, if we think of the Sony PlayStation, Sony actually has the best display, not counting raw resolution, because they have OLED that is also RGB every pixel. This display is made by Samsung. I don't know why. Like, we're arguing here with the Rift S, and everyone has different opinions, like the benefits of LCD, the benefits of OLED. Well, there's a display out there, everybody, that has the benefits of both. And I want to see somebody do that. Like, take the Sony display, split it so we have two actual displays instead of singular display, and have the benefits of OLED in terms of the colors and the vibrancy, but also have this benefit of the RGB subpixel structure so that every pixel can hit every color being illuminated. I think that's the win. So all in all, my take is I prefer apples to apples. If we're looking at the same resolution, I prefer RGB over Pentile RGBG all day, every day. Now, there is a trade-off for that. For that improvement, you're going to trade color. You're going to trade black levels. I also want to point out that on the Rift and most OLED headsets, you are not getting the true black of OLED. The Rift with the SPUD in efforts to correct Mira and correct black smear, they don't actually darken every pixel when black is shown. So you're not seeing the true differences between OLED and LCD when it comes to VR. I think we need to take all the noise. Like, when we think of smartphones, everyone says OLED's the better. And that's where that display industry went, but I don't think it applies in the same thing when you're talking VR headsets. So in this case with the Rift S, and I'll wrap it up, I don't want to hog this too long. In this case with the Rift S, this is more of a side grade. You're getting a clear upgrade in the subpixel arrangement. Things are going to look notably better, notably more clear. What it's going to cost you, unfortunately, is it is going to cost you some grayer blacks when you play Elite Dangerous. It is going to cost you some color vibrancy. I would argue that the Rift already was sort of muted compared to the Odyssey, compared to the Vive. So I think people moving from Rift to Rift S won't notice it to the same degree that someone moving from Vive to Rift S would, or from Samsung Odyssey to Rift S would, because the Rift was already sort of muted some. But that's the trade-off. One's not innately better than the other. It's just a compromise. They're just different.
That's a great point, Steve, because I'll never forget when I first got my Oculus Rift after being a Vive guy for so long. I played Lucky's Tale in the Oculus Rift, and I was like, what happened to all the color? Like, what happened to all the vibrancy? It's like, where's the contrast? That was just one of the first takes I had is when I played Lucky's Tale.
Yeah, people don't talk about that enough, but the Rift really is muted already. So I'd assume the LCD version will be similar in the colors and everything like that. I just wanted to give you some percentages because I think you made a good point there, Steve, with the subpixel arrangement. So the Rift has 113% more subpixels than CV1. So that's a lot. It actually has more. If you count subpixels, it has more than even like the Odyssey or Odyssey Plus or a Vive Pro. So even though it's like a lower resolution overall, if you count all the new subpixels that are in there, it'll actually be more clear than potentially those headsets. So that's something interesting as well. But yeah, I think overall, definitely a side grade, but LCD isn't as bad as people say it is. It's same as, people talking about tracking. It's another one of those things where like, the Go is fine. Everyone likes the Go, and no one's really complaining about the Go black levels. And on top of that, one thing I also quickly wanted to mention is John Carmack tweeted that, the LCD on S and Go has lower persistence than the OLED in the Rift and Quest, which means, there'll be less of that black smear. That really shouldn't be any smear, because I know that was always a big thing in my Rift originally when I first got it. As I'm like, man, there's like, it's smearing everywhere when it is a dark scene. So hopefully that'll be eliminated with the LCD. So I think there's definitely benefits to LCD, and hopefully we'll get the hybrid.
Eventually. I would also add that for people with a OG Rift that are considering I almost said upgrade, side grading to the Rift S, and they're worried about Elite Dangerous. I don't know that you're going to enjoy the darker blacks of Elite Dangerous in the original Rift with the God rays versus the LCD. Maybe the display doesn't have as pure a black, but you have essentially no God rays and very, very minimal glare. I think that combination is going to be an improved Elite Dangerous experience compared to the CV1.
I think as well, just on that Elite Dangerous point, because this is probably my main concern, because I'm a big Elite Dangerous fan. But I think on that as well, I'll take lack of God rays anytime over deeper blacks in that game. But I do need to try it. I will say I need to try it. But also when you're in the headset, everything is sort of relative to everything else. So I go from the Vive, everything's very bright and everything looks great. And then you go to the Rift, everything's slightly more subdued, as Steve mentioned, but you get used to it, and everything is relative to everything else within that headset to a certain extent. I'm not arguing the fact that LCD will inevitably give you sort of reduced black levels, but I think you can sort of get used to it, get past it in some ways, and I'm not going to write this headset off just because of that. I would love to try it.
Yeah, I'm excited for one screen. This is something I always forget to mention, is I think one screen is good also just because the screen is exactly the same. You're not going to have to worry about like different color disparity or like different contrast. Because I know in my Rift personally, it was a very early on Rift. So, one of the screens when it's pitch black is actually like completely black. One is gray. So then my eyes are all bugged out. And like, that's always been how my Rift is. So, one screen has that benefit of eliminating any potential problems with two displays, which is neat. I guess overall, if we're giving +1s to Rift S, this is kind of just a +0. This is like here or there, right? So right now we have +1 for comfort, +1 for tracking overall, and kind of a wash for the screen, I'd say. Anything else we wanted to mention on the screen? I think we could talk about lenses after this. There's stuff to say there. So all right, let's talk about the lenses. I think these lenses are similar to Quest and Go, but apparently they're newer with a little bit bigger sweet spot, is what I've heard from some of the information I got. I don't know if I'm wrong about that, but it's similar enough that we can talk about our experience with the Go and things like that. So Gary, I think this is exciting for you with Elite Dangerous, probably. Like, talk about the lenses.
Yeah, no, and I've mentioned before, weirdly, like in the past, where I've got an Oculus Go, and I'm sure I've mentioned this on the show before in the past, where I've just said, if I could get the Oculus Go experience on the PC and have all that fidelity, that would be great. I wasn't necessarily thinking it would be the Rift S or anything like that. I was expecting it would be sort of well, I don't know what I was expecting really, but that's always been a thought that's crossed my mind, because I do really love the Oculus Go in terms of display and the optics, and the optics are a huge deal for me. The Oculus Go looks so clear. There are almost, well, I don't want to say zero God rays, but it's getting towards that side. And I just love that display. I really do. And that's what makes me quite optimistic about the display in the Rift S and why I want to try it. I've not tried it in Elite Dangerous or anything like that, so I don't know how that's going to fare up. But overall, whenever I used my Rift here in my office, and then I went back to my Oculus Go in the house, and I'd immediately notice the clarity of everything through these lenses and the optics. So and I actually felt like the sweet spot was relatively big in the Oculus Go as well. But if the Rift S is offering even better optics than that, then I'm fully on board with that. In fact, I'm almost at the point of where I think we've sort of alluded to the fact that most of us would consider this a sideways move for the Rift. And I do too. I think it's more or less a sideways move. It's not the next big high-end HMD that we all hope for, but I am fully prepared to just sell my Rift and jump into this and go for that. Based more or less on the optics are such a huge thing for me, more than anything else, and it's not something you can easily quantify. You can't put this on a spec sheet. You can't say these are twice as good optics, because it varies so differently from person to person, and you can't give it a number or anything like that. So I think there's a lot to say with the optics that people don't really focus on quite so much, literally, and I think that's something that I personally really do focus on. And it's part of the reason we'll get onto the HP Reverb a little bit later on. It's sort of why I'm a little bit hesitant on that headset more than the Rift S, only because I've tried the Oculus Go optics and they work really, really well. That's why I'm looking forward to the Quest, and that's why I'm looking forward to the Rift S as well, at least trying it. But yeah, optics are a huge deal for me, and I don't hear people talking about them enough, really.
Yeah, it's true. Steve, what do you think?
Pretty much everything Gary said. It's obvious that when I put the Go on for the first time, that God rays were less. And I've always felt that because I wear glasses and because I have an astigmatism, my vision is 20/20 when I'm wearing my glasses, so I see just fine. But what happens is, because of my astigmatism, the way the light bends, I can see halos around bright lights, like driving at night against headlights on oncoming traffic. I see halos around headlights, things like that. So I've always felt that God rays, which are in a way kind of be like headlights, looking at them at night, I feel like they maybe just bother me more. The OG Vive, I really hated those lenses because in addition to the God rays, you could see the concentric grooves, and the grooves sort of cut up each God ray into different segments. So then I had additional individual halo sort of around all of those. And so I can't stand. No one likes God rays. I don't know what I'm saying here. Everyone hates God rays. What I'm saying is I think I might hate God rays more than the average VR consumer, for good reason. And it was very obvious when I tried to Go, and also the Pimax 5K, that God rays could be basically eliminated. The Pimax and the Go still have some glare that make them in ways technically worse in this aspect than the PlayStation VR aspherical lenses, which I think are the best when it comes to glare and God rays. But so there's still room for improvement, but compared to Generation 1 lenses, compared to the original Rift lenses, CV1, compared to the OG Vive lenses, this is an improvement. And I feel like that this is no question an upgrade from CV1. Like this, if we're keeping score, this is a +1. No questions asked. Now, it gets into what is going to be a -1. I'll go ahead and assume that we're all going to say it's a -1, the IPD. Lenses come into play here when we're talking IPD, so I don't want to jump into that topic just yet, but the lenses themselves, though, is definitely an upgrade, +1.
Cool. Anthony, what do you think? You tried these amazing new lenses. What do you think of them?
It's interesting because I've never been like... People get irritated by God rays, and I'll notice God rays like during a title screen, but other than that, I don't really notice God rays. One thing I noticed a lot more is back when I had the original Vive back in the days, I used to play with like a super thin face gasket that was like 2.5 millimeters, maybe 3 millimeters. It was almost nothing, just a little bit of cushion. And I did it so that I could get my eyeballs as close to the screen as humanly possible and try to expand my FOV. And that would make the concentric rings even that much more noticeable. And that was irritating. But I never I don't know. I've never been bothered that much by the God rays, and so when I was using it, I didn't notice this like world of difference. But it's never been a problem for me so much, the God rays. So I couldn't honestly. There wasn't anything that like jumped out to me like, oh my God, this is so much better than CV1 as far as like the lenses and stuff. The bigger sweet spot is a nice bonus to be sure.
Yeah, I guess we can touch on the thing that everyone has been talking about when this announcement happened, is that there's no IPD adjustment. And I guess personally, I mean, I'm lucky. I have like the exact average IPD. I don't, so I shouldn't really be talking, but I feel like um, I haven't heard many people be complaining about the Go, and the Go has no IPD adjustment. I've never heard of somebody who has a Go and like it's completely blurry. Maybe a few edge cases, which I feel for those people. Like get an OG riff while you can if you want to have IPD adjustment. But I think for everyone I've showed the Go to, no one's ever realized that that's a problem. Like, so maybe is that like a big problem that actually isn't a problem? Everyone just is pretending it is, because I feel like Oculus wouldn't do something that would just eliminate like a bunch of people to use their headsets. Maybe the sweet spot's big enough that software IPD adjustment's good enough now. Personally, I'm not as worried, but like I said, I have a perfect IPD, so I can't really be complaining. But Gary, what do you think if we want to go around with this quickly?
No, I mean, in terms from a personal level, let me talk about this on a personal level first. Having tried the Go, I have no problems at all with that headset. Again, I'll go back to it. It just looks perfect to me. The optics and the placement of the IPD is perfect for me. And if they do have a large field of view, larger sweet spot, then that could be beneficial overall to keep this fixed IPD. And also, I suppose, if you've got a larger IPD with this, the main complaint could be that you get a reduced field of view, because if your IPD is on the outskirts, like the larger IPDs, you're getting to the very edge of that sweet spot and you've got no control over the individual panels. It's a single screen, and it could potentially reduce your field of view, I suppose, with that. Probably not to any great degree. I don't know that overall. But the main point I want to get to on this is a contradiction from Oculus, from what they're saying. They want to position this. We'll get onto price, I'm sure, in a second, but they want to position this as a headset to get more people into VR. This is a direct contradiction to that claim, because IPD is a huge thing for people, and if they are not accommodating more IPD than the original Rift, that contradicts what they're going for with this headset, and I think that's a huge mistake. It's one of the biggest mistakes they've made with this headset, in my opinion, and because it directly contradicts what they're saying, it could make a lot of people think this is not the headset they wanted to produce, it's the headset they could produce for this price. And again, we'll get into price a little bit later on, but I think that's a strange decision that they've made with this.
Yeah, what do you think, Steve?
Well, Gary, you stole my thunder. I was just going to call out that contradiction, because that's exactly what this is. It makes no sense. If the whole argument is that, hey, this is for the masses. This is for everyday Joe. This is to get, Facebook's goal is to get to 1 billion people in VR. There's a lot of that 1 billion that's not going to sit at this correct IPD. Now, I think a lot of people won't know. So like we know now, like we've been adjusting IPD for many years. We know what it's like to not be in the sweet spot. But let's just picture for a moment that you have an IPD of 78. You're Shaquille O'Neal. And you put on a Rift S, and your experience is your experience. Like when you put on VR for the first time, like you're blown away by everything. You're seeing the stereoscopic vision. You're looking around and realizing that you can look and be inside of a space, and you got all of the sensories happening. You may not notice the IPD. So for the people that are new to Rift S, they're not going to know what they're missing. Ignorance is bliss, right? Like, and I think that's sort of why Oculus accepted it. When I look at it as a whole, I think it's very sad that one of the things everyone was excited about, sort of, silver linings when Facebook bought Oculus was, well, at least, we got some serious money behind it. Like the R&D is going to be impressive. They're going to be able to throw a lot of money behind it. And Facebook, at the very least, should be able to evolve VR. So now we're 3 years after the launch of the CV1, and Facebook, with all the money behind them, are releasing a headset with no IPD adjustment. That seems just wrong. It seems stupid. I don't think it was a big issue on the Go because people have different expectations on the Go. Like, okay, yeah, Oculus Go, like it's a $199 thing that I'll watch Netflix in or maybe play a game for a couple minutes, whatever. Like, your expectations around a more of an impulse buy product at $199 is different than expectations whether you have VR experience or whether you have no VR experience. Your expectations are different when it's $399. And that's why I think the no IPD is a problem. I said last week when we were talking about predictions, I said, no way. Like, I'm not buying the rumors. I'm not buying it because there's no way. Like, of all companies out there making VR, like this is the type of thing I'd expect from HTC when they, do their first one, or like this is the type of stuff I expected from Nintendo Labo. Like, this is not what I expected by the billions of Facebook dollars behind VR. I did not expect a mainstream, their top of the line, their PC VR headset to be missing such a basic and fundamental need that has been in VR since basically day one. Now, like Chris, my IPD, according to my eyeglass prescription, is 61.5. But I have, ever since using the Rift and using the little crosshairs that come up when you slide the IPD slider, I actually have higher clarity at about 63, 64. So I think I'm in the clear. I'm not personally worried about no IPD adjustment. But when I think of dudes with big heads, or when I think of a lot of women and children, more importantly, like, what is the average IPD of a woman? I don't know. Like or a kid that's older than 12. Let's get around the legality. But like, there's a lot of people out there that could be into VR that's not going to hit that 61 to 67-ish sort of bandwidth where the IPD essentially won't be an issue.
Yeah, it's, IPD is such a hard topic, but also let me bring up the fact that, the PSVR doesn't have physical IPD adjustment either. That thing has way smaller sweet spot than the Rift S has. So, I mean, it just seems weird for people to be so angry about this. I get it because of the history of Oculus and that they've always had IPD adjustment. They've always made that a clear thing. But the fact is there's millions of PSVRs out there that don't have IPD adjustment, and nobody's really complaining about it. So maybe it's not as big a deal as some say it is. I mean, it obviously is if you're in that really low or really high IPD. Anthony, what do you think about this? I know your IPD is a little bit above average and you tried Rift S. And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the thing about IPD, and this is something that I'm just kind of maybe realizing this week, is one of the things I've noticed about my playing habits in VR is you get these people out there that they can put a VR headset on and play VR for 4 hours straight, 5 hours straight, 3 hours straight. They're playing Skyrim or whatever, and they're just in there, baby. And for me, ever since I've gotten into VR, I've never played that long. Like, the longest for me is like an hour and a half. Usually when I'm playing VR, it's like 45-minute sessions and then take a little break and then come back type of thing. And you know what I'm starting to think about all this is that maybe my IPD has a little something to do with this, because I think what it is like actually enjoying the experience is fine, but I think it does wear on you after a while when your IPD is a little bit out of the ideal range. Now, my IPD, I went to an eyeglasses place and they used a special thing. Like, I had the lady do it and it came out to like 71/72. So that's kind of what I've always tried to use and one of the things I can say is with the Oculus Go, like, Gary has always kind of raved about how great the Oculus Go is. And I've always kind of thought to myself, I wonder why Gary likes the Oculus Go so much more than me. Not that I don't like it or not that I haven't been impressed by the Go, but I was just never quite wowed by it to the extent that Gary was. And then again, I kind of thought, oh yeah, the IPD, that's probably what it is. Gary probably has an IPD that is like pretty much perfect for it. And so it works really good for him. My IPD is a little bit out of the scale. And so I suffer a little bit from that. This bigger sweet spot. Well, one of the things I'll have to say is like when I did try this, I tried the Rift S 2 different times. And one of the things I did come out of there noticing, and I told this to Sebastian when we did our little show that was there right there on the spot, is I felt like it was a little bit pushed in, you know, in terms of the FOV. Like that was one thing I actually legitimately did notice. But one caveat I have to say here is the people that were setting up the demos, they weren't changing the software IPD for every person that was coming in there. You know, they weren't doing anything like that. Also, I made a mistake personally by not hitting that button and trying to get it up more into my face, you know, because like when I'm playing PlayStation VR, it's got the Halo design and it's floating out there. And sometimes you'll play the PlayStation VR and then you're like, oh man, I need to like move it back up into my face. I forgot about that, you know, sliding it up in. And when you slide it closer to your face, it could improve it for people that have a bigger IPD. And then you have the larger sweet spot and you also have the software adjustment. So I think when you combine all three of those things, I think I would probably be okay. Now, if you got an IPD of like 75 or something, or like 56, yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit of a downer. But I think I might barely be in the range when I adjust all those other factors. So, you know, that's basically my thoughts on that.
So you can test this. I think all the reasons you describe are why you may have seen less field of view. But you can test this here today. Go into your Rift and slide the IPD. If you think of each lens sort of like a circle in a Venn diagram, and as you move the lenses closer together, you're going to have less field of view, but you're going to have more binocular overlap. And then as you move them further apart, you're gaining field of view up to the limits of the fill factor of the display and everything. So I would imagine that just pound for pound, all else being equal for you, Anthony, the forced smaller IPD upon you will manifest as a slightly less field of view. I don't know it's enough to notice. It may be half a degree. I would have to know all the details to calculate that geometry. But technically, running a smaller field of view for anybody, regardless of what your IPD is less field of view.
Would it only affect the field of view though on a fixed, like a single screen, a fixed IPD? Because like mechanical IPD adjustment actually moves the screens out. So from that respect, I suppose the field of view wouldn't necessarily change for people with a larger IPD, but on a single screen where you're adjusting it based on software, I understand it could make a significant difference on the field of view, or well, probably not significant, but it could make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I notice it when first you're going to notice it mostly with binocular overlap, but there will be limits. I guess I guess I don't assume that everything carries when you slide it out. That I agree with the point you're making. If the display and the optics are moving together, I'm assuming the software, the behind the scenes, is also moving that in the rendering as well. But on a fixed display, I think you're right. I think we need to know, like, no one's really talked about the utilization factor of the panel. We know the panel's 2560 by 1440, but since it's fixed in place, you know, and like, what's the utilization? People talk about fill factor, things like that. What is the utilization of this on the Rift S? That'll also be a sort of an interesting point when we actually get these in our house and we get away from the GDC floor and people are really able to pick it apart.
Yeah, this is all super interesting. We'll have to see what happens. I think best bet for anybody who's thinking about getting a Rift S and has like a very high or low IPD is try a Go. They're cheap enough that someone probably has one, and like, you know, then you'll have a pretty decent idea of if you'll be okay or not. Let's hope that the lenses are slightly even better than the Go, but we'll have to wait and kind of see with more hands-on details about that. All right, I think that's really it for lenses, other than I think I heard the FOV is slightly higher from somebody. Is that true? Like, did anyone else hear that? But it's probably like a few degrees or something stupid that isn't really
No,
amount to anything.
I heard that about the HP. I didn't hear that about the Rift. That might be where you heard it.
No, I heard it about HP too. We'll find out. I mean, overall, it's it's a wash probably. IPD adjustment is a big bummer though. Let's talk about another big
That's a
bummer.
-1. The IPD, that's a -1 in the record, the scorekeeping.
Yep. So we got 2 -1s, 3 +1s so far. Overall, so far, it's going to probably end up being a wash, because now we're going to talk about the lack of physical headphones and the inclusion of the audio being in the strap like it is in the Oculus Go and the Oculus Quest, which, to be fair, I like the audio in the Go a lot, and like hearing that it's improved in the Quest is really awesome. Like, I think not having to flip those down is super nice for on the go portable stuff. But if I'm playing Beat Saber, I don't want it blaring out in the room, and that lack of bass that will probably be there on something like the Rift S is just kind of a big bummer for me. So even though it's a plus in the Quest and Go, I think it's almost maybe just a negative in the Rift S just because of the use case. But let's go around. Gary, what do you think?
No, I'm exactly the same as you, Chris. That's weird, isn't it? It's how, like, on the Go and the Quest, I can imagine myself sort of dealing with it. It's not a big deal, and yet when I on the Rift S, I do want sort of headphones. I do want proper headphones on that experience for whatever reason. I'm not really sort of pinned that down for whatever reason, but yeah. So yeah, to me, this is a bit of a negative overall on the Rift S. And it's a bit of a shame. I think I read a report as well on either Upload or Road to VR where they said that Oculus potentially had plans to have some kind of over-ear headphone attachment or something like that for the Rift S at some point. We'll see what comes from that. But yeah, I don't know what the difference is. It's just, I suppose you want the higher end experience all round when you have a Rift S. So you want the better sound as well as the better visuals as well. So I guess it comes down to that.
Yeah, what do you think, Steve?
Oh, I hate this. Like, this, if I almost don't believe I'm going to say it, but if I don't end up buying a Rift S, trading my Rift for a Rift S and paying whatever the cost delta is, if I make that decision, this may be the factor that steers me the most into making that decision. I can't stand it. I think it's crazy. Like, when I went from a Vive to a Rift, and I saw the benefit, the integrated audio. Now, you can say that the Rift S has integrated audio. Like, look, that is not, I haven't heard it, so take it with a grain of salt. But I would be hard pressed to imagine that integrated audio can compete in any sort of serious way with actual headphones. So once I went, I don't have a headset that doesn't have, not other than the Go, I don't have a headset that doesn't have integrated headphones now. I went out and I bought the Mantis clip-on over-the-ear headphones for the PlayStation VR. I put the deluxe audio strap on my Pimax. I have a Rift. Like, I'm not, like, there's no way you're going to convince me that not having integrated headphones are a good decision anymore. If you remember what it's like fumbling around, or I guess when you play PSVR, Anthony, you'd still do it, but having that extra cable and putting the headphones, I used to use these, and to put them over my, over the headband, like, no, like, this is such a stupid decision. Like, and it's rumored, and it was always said that Palmer Luckey was a big audio guy, and the costs, I think the headphones on the CV1 was like sort of his pet element of it, that it was important to him. And if that's the case, we know he's no longer with the company. It's like maybe the importance there is devalued a bit at a high level, but I think this is fundamentally the wrong direction to go. We talk about friction, like, keeping with the theme, we have our personal feelings on each and every one of these bullet points, and then we have to think of what's it like for Joe Walmart. Well, I'm not convinced that Joe Walmart's going to have a better experience having to get his own headphones and strap them over the headset. So this is not a decision for the betterment of Joe Walmart. This is not a decision to get more people into VR. This is not a cost decision, because the damn thing's still $399. So why did they take this out? Why did they do this? It's just wrong. I don't have an answer for why they did that. So I just think it's the wrong step.
Sounds like a big negative 20 for you, Steve.
It is.
Anthony, what do you think about this? I'm sure you heard some audio from it, but you know, it being GDC, like there's so much sound.
Yeah. Well, real quick, Chris, I don't know if you can change this, but I think your autofocus is turned on, so it's kind of like zooming in and out.
Yeah,
but
I
if you
can fix
change
that.
Okay. So the thing about the audio is interesting because I remember when I first got my Rift, I actually did not like the fact that it had these built-in headphones because I mean, even, you know, yeah, I heard all this stuff about Palmer Luckey. He's an audiophile, and they made sure that the headphones were actually really good and all this stuff. But I'm kind of like, you know, I have these Sennheisers, and I know that they're better than what is included with the Rift. And I thought, this is just an irritating thing that's kind of in the way. I'm going to disconnect them. I'm going to connect my real headphones because I want better audio quality. And so it's almost just an irritant altogether. And then what I found out was maybe more so laziness than anything. I just basically stuck with the Rift headphones, and I've always used the Rift headphones. Only time I've ever like done anything with the Rift headphones is when I first got like Beat Saber. I would take the headphones off and use my big tower speakers. And because you get hot and sweaty, like one benefit of like actually using built-in audio or using like some type of outside speakers is there's less heat. Like when you're covering your ears, it's hotter. So that's, you know, one minor benefit there. But one thing I hate about all these headsets that are putting the external headphone jack on the side of the headset, why are they doing this? If you look at the HP Reverb, MRTV had a little video and he was talking to the HP guy and it was showing the HP Reverb. They have a little cord, a little tiny cord that comes out the back where you can pop your headphones on that. The HTC Vive has a little cord on the back. You pop, like your headphones should be connecting back here, not up here, because I have headphone things where it's like a connector that's like long, and then you got this big Frankensteinian thing coming out of the side of it. It's not a good look. It's kind of like put the headphone thing in the back is my thought process. Now, one thing I'll say is I'm assuming the built-in speaker system that they're using is the same as the Oculus Quest. And in my Oculus Quest demo, I had one Oculus Quest demo where I was in a private room. There was no sound, no chaos, this big giant room. And I pumped the volume way up. And the sound was actually pretty decent. Okay, it was pretty decent. So that's kind of a bonus. And then if you're in a situation where you're demoing this to a lot of people, for example, let's say you're having a birthday party, a lot of people are over and you're giving a lot of people some VR samples. It's actually kind of nice to just use that built-in audio and you're swapping people in and out of the experience. You don't have to worry about all these headphones, you know, and all that type of stuff. That's kind of a bonus. But it's really hard to spin this in any kind of positive direction. This is pure cost savings. Almost everything they're doing here is based around cost savings. We didn't really get the price drop we were looking for, and it sounds like, well, we're going to get into price later, so I'll save that. But yeah, it's probably a downer overall.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to like quantify why I'm fine with it on Quest, and I guess it's what you were saying, Anthony, is like if you bring Quest to a friend's house, you don't have to worry about anything. Everyone will be able to hear what's going on. But where it's my personal Rift that's going to be in my man cave, and I'm not, you know, I don't want sound blaring out. Like I feel like everyone's going to be able to hear that, and maybe I don't want that on the Rift as much because I can choose whether or not I want the audio mirroring through my speakers. So you kind of lose that control with Rift S. But I guess there is at least 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. It's in the wrong place, that's for sure. But at least we have one. The Rift never had one. That was always a big complaint for people. But yeah, so it's definitely a big negative. I think we're kind of, I mean, we could talk about controllers, but I don't know if there's much to say about them. They're just... They're just, you know, Quest controllers, the same controllers. We can talk about Passthrough Plus, though. This is a cool new announcement that I think is probably a big deal. Maybe we should go to Anthony first to give us the rundown if you've tried this at all.
Yeah, so I did not try it on the Rift S. I tried. They just never put you into that when you were doing the Rift S demos. But I'm assuming it's very similar to the way it worked on the Quest. and it was awesome on the Quest. I was blown away by this feature. In fact, one thing I'm going to say about Passthrough Plus, this is the secret sauce, baby. This is one of the few things that the Rift S, like the comfort and the pass, and then not worrying about sensors anymore and having pretty much pinpoint accuracy, and Passthrough Plus. This is the feature that you didn't know would be a game changer, and it's going to be a game changer. Because the thing is, okay, so first of all, Passthrough Plus, like when you're setting up Guardian and all of that, what they're doing is they're doing a correction to the way the cameras are viewing your outside area. And so they're using a software to kind of make it stereoscopic and kind of put it in the right frame of mind. So it kind of it looks right. Like you're looking at it, it's like black and white. But then you see like little color things that are going on. And I was like, whoa, what is this AR mode? Like when they first put the Quest on me, I was like, whoa, what is this? Did I get a magic leap all of a sudden? No, but it's really cool. I mean, you can see that, like I saw the lady that was setting up my demo. I'm like, wow, I was just blown away by the experience of Passthrough Plus. And then reading about it more is that you can just go into Oculus Dash. And so you could be in anything, right? And within a matter of seconds, you can get a view of what's going on in your room. So you could see, oh, is my cat, am I going to step on my cat? Is she even in the room right now? Like those or where's my cup? Or, oh, I need to grab a chair. I'm playing LA Noire and now I'm driving the car. Let me grab my chair and move it into position so I can sit down and drive the car while I'm seated. This is actually a really cool thing. It's kind of minor, but it's going to be one of those things where when you really start to get used to it, it's kind of a game changer in certain ways. I think
sorry, Anthony, to interrupt. What does it look like? Because I think we've seen like hints of this, like at some events previously where they were showing it off on Oculus Quest. What does it look like in the headset? Is it like literally a pass through of the real world, or is it sort of like a pencil drawing, like an outline drawing, or how does it look to you?
Yeah, it's not AHA, the video, the old AHA video. No, it's the real world. It's black and white. But it's the real world, and whatever software tricks that they're using to like correct it so that it's stereoscopic and all of that, they're doing a wonderful job because it looks great. I mean, yeah, I'm very impressed with what it's doing as far as, and then also like in that interview with Nate Mitchell and Norman Chan, he asked him at the end, will developers actually be able to use this mode at some point? Could they incorporate this mode, like some minor little AR features into things? And he was saying, well, maybe a little bit down the road, but so there's some excitement there for that possibly down the road. But this is actually a super cool feature.
I've struggled to vision exactly what major benefit it's going to, because we've had pass-through. I mean, if you go back to the original Vive, and I'm sure it wasn't as nice, but you could hit the little button and you could see into the real world with the camera on the front of the Vive. On the Windows MR units, they now have flashlight, which you just say flashlight. I don't even have to hit a button, and my hands turn into two flashlights that can peek into the real world, and it looks good. Like you can find objects. If you're not using controllers, let's say you're playing a gamepad game, when you say flashlight, you just sort of get a centralized view that's head tracked. So I'm not saying that Passthrough Plus isn't better, but in terms of just what exactly it's going to do in terms of bigger value in comparison to flashlight and Windows MR, the pass-through functionality that's in the Vives, what is it? Is Oculus said that there's going to be some sort of secret sauce that they're going to utilize this in some different way? Because otherwise, I would kind of consider it a neutral draw with the competition.
I think it's just the fact that it's their stereo adjustment. I think that's the difference. Like, I don't think you're in all those other methods. I don't think you're getting like a true stereo look at your room. And in this one you are. The other thing I have to admit though is, like, when I had my Vive, I never really used the Tron camera thing very much, and I've never really used Windows mixed reality. So maybe I should kind of curb my enthusiasm a little bit for it, and maybe it's more of a case of just I never really used this stuff before, and I'm kind of like wowed by it because I didn't know how easy But I do think the stereo-ness of it is actually a major factor. And then also just like you take your, I mean, it's better for the Quest maybe than for Rift S, because you're going from room to room. You're going to be in different situations with the Quest. And just to put your headset on, because normally, like, you know, when we're setting up our Guardian and stuff, or Chaperone or whatever, you're doing it outside of the headset, and you're like taking your controller and you're walking around the room and doing all of that. And now you can do all of that with your headset on, and I think that's an advantage as well, but not so much for people that have their man caves and they're not going to different rooms.
Yeah,
the stereoscopic aspect of it seems to be a big difference. And I think, like you said, for Quest, being able to deal with your Guardian in Quest is probably a big deal, because if it's portable and you're taking it all over the place, I imagine you're going to be doing lots of Guardian setups.
Yeah, I was gonna say I didn't get too much clarity on this, but then someone talked more about how Guardian is gonna work now, and like I'm super excited about this. You literally, it's in 3D. Your room's in 3D with Passthrough Plus. You point to the corners of that you want the Guardian to be set up at. You don't even have to walk over there or trace anything. You just go dig, 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 and then like you're done. So like if that's really how the setup's going to be, like that's going to be so much easier for everybody. I have this giant room, I can just point to the corners of it in like 5 seconds and I'm done. So that's super, super duper cool to me. If that's what happens, that's going to be a major improvement over what we're doing today. Today is frustrating.
and it remembers different rooms. That's the most incredible thing as well. I can't wait to really experiment with this. Can it do sort of non-rectangular rooms? Can you have like an L-shaped room or something like that?
Yeah, I believe you can, because like I saw some of the Guardian boundaries that they had previously set up. Like you would, if you stepped a little bit too far, you would see where they set it up, and it wasn't always like a square or rectangle.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I think that's overall like a super neat feature that I think is cool for me, just because I've used Flashlight on Windows MR, and it's a neat little gimmick. But what was way cooler is when I plugged in a Leap Motion to my Rift and like taped it to the front, and the Leap Motion does have some stereoscopy or whatever you say, but it's not corrected. It's not like the real world. It's just like my eyes are suddenly here or out in front of my face. So I mean, with this correction where it's actually things are where they really are, I think that's huge. Hopefully, Rift S can unlock some future stuff like hand tracking, all this other stuff. I think it's possible with Rift S hardware for sure. It's just a question whether Oculus will do that for us or not. They probably won't.
I was just going to say, with no IPD adjustment, there is nothing to correct.
Oh no. Yeah, but I don't think did you guys mention this? I don't know. I haven't seen previous weeks, but did you see that HTC released like hand tracking for the original Vive and all that? That's interesting to me. If HTC can do it with one camera, Oculus can do it with 5, at least some form of it. It probably won't though. All right, getting to the big thing, price. What's the price of Rift S? Was it $299 like I had predicted, and I feel like all of us had hoped? Answer is no. It's actually more expensive. It's $399, which was a big bummer for me, and honestly was the most baffling thing out of all of this, because I'm like, the Quest is $399. This makes absolutely no sense. So we can go around the round table and see what everyone thinks. Gary, what was your what do you think of the price?
Yeah, so I made a tweet last night about this, actually, just on the price, because it was more like, when you look at this on the wider VR headsets, the wider VR hardware that's out there, the price makes perfect sense, and I don't really have a big problem with the price from that context. But when you place the Rift S into the other Oculus lineup, it really doesn't make sense. I think it's a little bit confusing for people to acknowledge the price that they're selling this for, when it's not even comparable to the Quest, because it's doing certain things differently. Some things better, some things worse, and you could argue all these points again and again. And I just think the price, to me, is more to do with, well, I don't know this for a fact, I'm just sort of making a jump here. The fact is, this price for $399, it doesn't make sense to enthusiasts, But if you are to place yourself as to PC gamer, so imagine yourself as a PC gamer 3 years ago, 2016, and you didn't want to jump into VR at that time. You tried the Rift, you tried the Vive, and you weren't necessarily sold on it at that time. And you thought, so I'm going to sort of half-heartedly follow it, and then when the next iteration of VR headsets come out, then I'll jump in. Now, to me, this price could be a reaction to the Quest. They want to make the Quest sort of soar and be this headset that everybody wants to buy. But it could equally be a headset that they are trying to appeal to people that didn't necessarily want to jump into VR originally. And this $50 bump could be to somebody that has half-heartedly followed this industry to say, okay, so it's $50 more than the current Rift, and it's got all of these different things. It's got a higher resolution. They're not looking into it too closely. It's got a higher resolution. I don't need to purchase all of these sensors and this kind of stuff. So this is the headset I've been waiting for. Now I'll jump in. So the price to me could be aimed at those kinds of people. Either way, I think we will see a price reduction on this by the end of the year or very early next year, back down to the 350. So I'm just thinking the reasons for this, and this is sort of the only reason I can think them costing it this at this price, unfortunately, because enthusiasts are not very enthusiastic about this price, unfortunately.
Yeah, Steve, what do you think?
I don't like the price. When the Vive Pro price was announced, I was very critical of the Vive Pro, and saying that it was overpriced. Now, the Vive Pro, its overpricing was very egregious. Like, it's no question. I'm not saying the Rift S is as misaligned on pricing as the Vive Pro was, but I'm going to make the same argument. My argument at the time with the Pro was, if I look at what's in the box with the Samsung Odyssey, and I look at the technology and the bill of material, the supply chain efforts, everything, when I look at those two boxes, there's one cost significantly more for no reason. Well, when I do the same argument here, I compare the Quest and the Rift S at the same price, but the Rift S has a lot less physical stuff in the box. There's no battery, there's no storage, there's no Snapdragon SoC, system on chip. There's a lot that isn't in the Rift S that's in the Quest, yet they're priced at the same price point. So I think just looking at it from that angle, when we can talk about why one is one way and theorize and rationalize, but to the consumer, when you look at the two boxes, the Rift S is overpriced. Or one could argue that the Quest is being sold too cheap, but either way, it's $399 and the Rift S is overpriced. So I tend to think, if I analyze it, I tend to think that that we're definitely going to get a price drop before the holidays. That would make a lot of sense, that they're just pricing it now. If anything, I think one of the factors influeing price is the Quest. You get people that have known Quest is coming. They've saved up their $399 dollars, and they are like, okay, well, if one box is $299, like we thought the Rift S should be, they're going to potentially lose some Quest sales by people that choose to buy the cheaper box, even though they're not really competing products. So I think the price is wrong. And overall, I think the, to sort of wrap up the Rift S at a higher point, my thoughts on it collectively as a whole, I think there's some mixed messaging from Oculus. I think they're talking out of both sides of their mouth with this product. It's not to say that the product is bad. It's not to say that I think anybody will have a bad experience with it. But, the whole theory of Oculus is taking steps towards the billion. They want 1 billion people in VR. That's great. That makes tons of sense. Like, let's cool. But then they go out and they take a headset, they take the IPD out of it, they take the audio out of it, or the headphones. I know it has audio. They do a lot of these decisions, but then also price it at $399. I'm not mad at them for doing cost cutting, but they should be passing it on to the consumer. If they want to keep the cost cutting for themselves, that's fine. That's their prerogative. But you can't tell me that they're taking steps to make VR more accessible for the masses and then charge more for it. Now, a lot of people will say that the Rift S is cheaper than a CV1 at $349 plus a third sensor. And I guess that's true. But in either way, it's the initial box costs more. The messaging is that it costs more, and I don't agree with it. Which really wraps this all up to say that the Rift S, in terms of accessibility, all we're really talking about here is inside out tracking. And the only consumer that they're reaching now with this Rift S product that they weren't reaching with the CV1 is the consumer that wants to pay $399 but doesn't want to deal with sensor setup, because the cost is essentially the same. They're not reaching a more cost conscious consumer with the Rift S. They're only reaching the consumer that wants PC VR, that already has a desktop PC powerful enough for it, that just didn't want to deal with the headache of sensors. And I don't know how big that market is, honestly. I think their biggest gain for this Rift S is going to be when they inevitably lower the price.
Yeah. Anthony, what are your thoughts on the price?
Well, that first day when we heard everything and I heard the price, like I saw the 1440p, I was like, oh my God, 1440p, are you kidding me? And then I saw the price, I was like, what? But one of the things that I think we need to step back and realize is we're in a bubble. We're in this Oculus bubble and this, subreddit bubble, and we are the hardest of the hardcore, that we're super into this stuff and we think about it every day and we're reading every little story that comes out. And so it's been going on for, I don't know when the original leak came out about the single screen and the no IPD. And then basically everybody started running with that and said, oh, well, this is, it's price reduction. It's race to the bottom. They're doing this. And you had people on the Vive subreddit that were like, yeah, this new Rift S is going to be $199. It's going to be $250. It's going to be $299. And you would hear that so many times that you start thinking, yeah, you're right. It is going to be $299. And then the other factor too is the Rift right now. Well, it's not available, I guess, but it was $350, right? And so it's looking like a price increase, which is really unusual to see that. But I think what we don't realize is this was a clearance sale. Dropping it to $349 was not a new price for the Rift. They might have wanted it to seem like that temporarily, but it really was to try to get some extra fence sitters that just needed a little more of a discount to kind of clear the decks, get rid of that inventory, clear Amazon and Best Buy and everybody to get all that stuff out of there to make way for this new headset. And Steve and a lot of other people believe later this year there's going to be a discount. But you know what? Nate Mitchell in the interview with Tested said that I thought he kind of cautioned that, we might not get as many dramatic discounts as quickly as you may have seen in the past. They might hold to this $399 for a while. Like they might stay at this $399 for a while. Because even though the Windows mixed reality headsets have these fire sales all the time, it's not making a dent. They're still below 10% on Steam, and it doesn't seem to be affecting them much. Now, maybe the Vive Focus or some other headset comes out and threatens them a little bit more, then maybe they feel like they need to make a move. The other thing too is one thing everybody's talking about as well is the subsidy. The Oculus Quest is a closed ecosystem. If you buy an Oculus Quest, you're locked into a closed ecosystem, and Oculus is guaranteed to make some good money off you, most likely. You buy a Rift S, you can potentially go to Steam and bypass Oculus altogether. What reason do they have to subsidize the Rift S when you can go get all your stuff? You could go to itch.io and just download a million demos and not even have Steam or Oculus. So there's a lot of factors at play here. And I do agree with Steve. They are talking out of both sides of their mouth. Like in one breath, they're saying, yeah, we want to sell to 1 billion people. We want to do all these things to open it up. And then, they're keeping the price high as well. So there's a lot of mixed factors. I think ultimately, like when we get into early 2020 and stuff, I think all of this stuff will settle out. but right now it does seem the pricing seems weird.
Yeah, it does seem weird. Like I was so focused on $299. I was telling everybody, I'm like, guys, Rift S gonna be $299. I'm so excited. That was a mistake. But I get it. The Vive is still $499. So what point does Oculus have to make anything less than $399? They're just gonna lose out on money at that point because people are still buying Vives even though they're $499. So why wouldn't Oculus, want to make a little extra money? It makes sense.
Oh,
Yeah.
one last point. Lenovo, they got to pay. Lenovo's getting something out of this deal, right? So they got to pay a little fee to Lenovo.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a good point. We didn't really touch too much on the Lenovo partnership. And a lot of people were negative on that. I think it points to the fact that this product was probably, dare I say it, rushed. I mean, it's not like it was built and everything in a month but they partnered with Lenovo. That's the theory. But they partnered with, and I don't know how to say it. Is it Xiaomi, to build the Go. Oculus didn't build the Go. It's like Oculus doesn't have it's not a manufacturing plant. They don't have robots and circuit board soldering equipment. Like they partner, just same like Apple. Apple doesn't manufacture anything. They design it, they control it, they buy the parts, and then they get a place like Foxconn to build it. So them necessarily partnering for the assembly isn't a big deal. What is interesting here in the Lenovo specifics is they clearly partnered with Lenovo on the design. And you can clearly see that. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It's not necessarily a good thing either. It's sort of just kind of middling, but it does point to an interesting aspect of what have they been working on for the last 3 years outside of Quest and Go, in terms of PC VR, if they had to partner with someone else on the design. It suggests that there is or there was something else that had their focus primarily, and it suggests, I don't know with any sort of insider knowledge, I haven't received a source that's tipped me off to this information. I'm just saying on the outside looking in, it suggests that there was a shift in direction at some point in, say, the last 9-12 months.
All right, Brendan Reeb.
Well,
I did want to just acknowledge a question that we got from Del Wolfensparger. Before we move on from the Rift S, we spent basically the whole show on the Rift S up until this point. But let's just have a final thing on this, because he asked the release date. What do we all think of the release date? There's so many rumors going around about the release date. What does everybody else think?
Well, I'll jump in. I'm going to go with Anthony. A lot of people are saying March 28th. And Anthony, in his video he did with MRTV on, I think it was Wednesday, Anthony put out March 28th. So anyone saying March 28th, the rumor started here with Anthony. So if he's correct, he gets all the credit. If he's wrong, he gets all the blame. I think the 28th makes sense. You got the whole 3rd anniversary of the CV1 launch. I don't think that necessarily matters to them. What makes me think it's sooner rather than later is the fact that the Rift CV1 is sold out everywhere. You can't buy it on Oculus.com. Last I checked, can't get it at Best Buy, Amazon, all these places. So if it's not next week and it's at F8, which is late April or whatever, like if it's a whole month from now, then that means they're not going to be able to sell any PC VR headsets for a whole month. And that doesn't seem like a smart decision making for any company that wants to make money. So, I would hedge my bets based on the supply issues that it's sooner than later.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, it was available on Best Buy last I checked, was the last one, but I just checked again. It's sold out there too. So it's like officially nowhere, which is a big shame. I also just wanted to say, adding and subtracting all our +1 and -1, we get a 0. We get an exact wash. It's as predicted. It's a definite side grade. Just thought I'd point that out.
We didn't plan this offline either. Like, this is happening, the scoring and everything's happening in real time. So this wasn't scripted.
Real time wash. But yeah. Anyone else have anything to add about
Well, so I made the prediction March 28th, right? Because I do believe the 3rd-year anniversary is like, and now on the 3rd-year anniversary, we're proud to announce Rift S is available immediately. I mean, it just seems like it writes itself. The other thing is the April 30th, because I believe the Oculus Quest is their baby. Like, this is their baby, bread and butter, and the Oculus Quest, most of us have assumed that on April 30th, bam, it's available, right? And you don't want to have the Rift S and the Quest, I don't think, on the same day. And I think if you bring it out on March 28th, the Rift S, and then the Quest is on April 30th, there's enough of a spread, enough weeks go by, you start to forget, and then they're kind of separated from each other a little bit. So the one thing I'll say is, if we get to March 28th and the Rift S still isn't here, maybe we're not getting the Quest on April 30th like we all thought, and maybe like pre-orders will be announced and you can start pre-ordering the Quest or something. So the one hesitation I have about March 28th is this does seem like so much of a last minute shifting of things that went on with this whole Lenovo thing. It's in a Lenovo shell. It has the Lenovo logo. It seems so last minute that if you really think it's truly last minute, you wouldn't think that they would have Rift S's available in mass. Also at GDC, like I was in a room where they had all the production. They had like 7 Oculus Quests there. They all say like experimental model or whatever it says on there. And the Rift S's, they didn't have as many of them. And people are saying, oh, well, they don't have as many of them because it's still in production. So a lot of people are saying like April and stuff. So there are mixed messages going out there, and you can look at it different ways.
Yeah, there's no way they can have no VR PC headset available for like a month. That would suck. That would be a big blow to the whole industry. I guess concluding thought for me is something that I know everyone was thinking. Why couldn't they just get a Quest, cut the SoC, make it 250 or something, or like 299, or even like 350? Why couldn't this have happened? Why did Oculus have to go and do these two completely separate things when it seemed like they could have been aligned so easily with like a very similar product and just tweaked it a little bit, save some cost, call it a day? Like that's the conclusion for me, is that Oculus is kind of a mess right now. It seems like they're not very unified in what's going on, because if they were, these headsets wouldn't be so vastly different. They're like completely different people working on these things.
That's a really good point, Chris, and one that we didn't hit on, but we probably should have earlier on, because the fact is, I think it's blatantly obvious that these devices have been made without any sort of simultaneous thought. Yeah. So there's no thought gone into like this is a Quest and now we're going to release a PC version. And I suppose you could argue that is because they don't want it to be a Quest with a cable to go to a PC. They don't want it to be perceived as that. They want it to be something else. They want it to be something different so that there is justification for them to sell it as a separate product. I think there's so many arguments. We've been going nearly 2 hours on the Rift S. I just wanted to point that out. But I'm up for going for however long everybody wants to. So we'll see how.
I'm good to keep going.
Yeah, this is a big episode. All right. So yeah, that's Quest. That's a wash.
Rift S.
Or Rift S. That's Rift S.
We're going to be doing that a lot, I think.
Yeah. Oh man, they're similar. All right, now it's Quest. It's Quest time. I think we should maybe first hear from Anthony on what he tried on Quest, how that went. Then we can give some rough impressions on that. And I'll be trying out Quest here next episode, so I can also give some impressions on that next episode as well. But Anthony, this is really the probably bigger news, like the bigger important thing for the VR industry, is that you got to try Quest. Quest is out there. Developers are trying it. What do you think?
Yeah, and the good news for me is I got a lot of Quest demos. I got super lucky in certain ways, because what happened was on Tuesday, when I got to GDC, I made a major mistake, by the way, going Tuesday and Wednesday. Terrible decision. It should have been Wednesday and Thursday. I would have tried the HP Reverb. I would have tried like Asgard's Wrath and Vacation Simulator and all these other demos I didn't get to. But, you know, water under the bridge, right? But on Tuesday, when I was there, they did have a demo that was set up for Sport Scramble, okay, the tennis game. I got to try it there. But as I was waiting for that demo, Shuhei Yoshida was like 2 people in front of me, but he left early. But as I was waiting for that demo and I got up to the front, there was a actual legitimate Oculus employee, because most of them were just hired like to cover the show basically. But there was a real legit Oculus employee was there, and she saw that my badge said media, and she said, "Oh, you're media. Do you want to get a private appointment for an Oculus demo?" And I was like, hell yeah. I was like, you know, what demo is it? What? And she's like, oh, I can't tell you. I mean, I don't know, but you could just sign up for a private demo. So I signed up for a private demo, and that turned out to be Quest in a private room with no loudness anywhere, and just very quiet. And I was able to play. Unfortunately, it was Sports Scramble again. I was hoping for Vader Immortal or Journey to the Gods, or, you know, something like that most people didn't see, and it was Sports Scramble again. But I got to try that game out quite a bit, and my impressions changed over the time with that. So the 3 things that I got to try on Quest: I tried Sports Scramble quite a bit. I actually tried Dead and Buried quite a bit too, because I got into multiple demos of Dead and Buried on the Quest. And then I tried Beat Saber. Those were the 3 things that I got to try on Quest. In terms of the hardware itself, very comfortable. I was blown away by the Passthrough when I first saw it, because I wasn't expecting it. They put it on my head, and I'm seeing the lady like tighten my straps and everything, and I'm seeing like actual reality out there, and I'm like, whoa, I wasn't expecting this. I was like, what is this AR mode that's going on? And got to try Dead and Buried and Dead and Buried 2, Beat Saber, and Sports Scramble. So Beat Saber, virtually flawless. I mean, and I've said it a million times, I wish they would put Beat Saber in the box. I seriously doubt they will do that, but I hope maybe for like later this year for holidays, maybe they'll have a special Beat Saber edition that comes out right before November. I think it would be the smartest thing in the world. You give Beat Games all this time to like sell it as an individual title, and then it's packed in for the Christmas rush. I think it'd be absolutely perfect. Beat Saber, absolutely awesome. Works great. Virtually 93% of the experience shines through on that. Dead and Buried 2 looks like more of an Oculus Go game to me in terms of like the graphics. You're kind of running around, and you're in a multiplayer scenario. The cool thing was, though, you're doing a multiplayer demo with somebody on a Rift S, so you got this, you know, crossplay going on. You got the cross-buy option now as well. And then let's see. Oh, Sports Scramble. Like when I first played Sports Scramble that very first day, I was thinking, oh man, this can't be the packing game. There's not enough to it, you know? It's just tennis, that's it. I didn't realize later that they have bowling and they have baseball as well. So there's 3 sports that are in Sports Scramble. And then also when I got my private demo for Sports Scramble, saw more of the game, saw more of the features, saw more of like how your rackets are changing into golf clubs, and they're changing into like a giraffe thing. I don't know what it was, some kind of weird giraffe thing. And you start off with kind of like a regular tennis racket, and then you get a power up and it turns into a pro tennis racket. Very Wii Sports like in terms of the game. Visuals are very bright, very colorful. I did see screen door effect. Like I did notice screen door effect both on Sports Scramble and on Dead and Buried 2. Didn't notice much screen door in Beat Saber as much. It seemed to be a little bit more hidden on Beat Saber. And man, I'm a fan. Like the Quest is a must buy, I think. The only people that will have problems with the Quest are hardcore graphic whores that are just like, oh man, this looks like, you know, this looks so lame. You know, if you're a hardcore graphics whore, you might have a little problem with the Quest. Controllers worked great. everything was awesome. I was just blown away by the experience.
That's so awesome to hear, because I wanted Quest to be good. I'm like, this needs to be good. And like you were saying, like, I think they nailed it, which is good to hear. I'm excited to try one myself and hopefully feel the same way.
Yeah, like I'm definitely buying a Quest. I'm more skeptical in terms of what it's going to mean in terms of the depth of games, but we've gone over this. Like Beat Saber like is perfect product, and I guess the news around the Quest this week was that there wasn't hardly any news for one. The big thing, I guess, was Beat Saber itself being announced, and I tweeted out from the VR Roundtable account. I'm like, everyone's going goo gaga over Beat Saber being announced for the Quest. Like it was just this, like everyone was going crazy over it, and I'm like, who thought Beat Saber wasn't coming to the Quest? Like, if you thought Beat Saber wasn't coming to the Quest, what's wrong with you? Like that, to me, like, I wasn't even impressed with the news because I knew it was coming to the Quest, because it just makes so much sense for it to come to the Quest. It would be absolutely crazy for it to not be there. And I agree with Anthony. It'd be absolutely crazy for them to not at least try to figure out how to get it in the box, for the people that buy it day one. The other piece of news, and I don't remember the exact timing of it, we found out that there was a 64 gigabyte and 128 gigabyte model. So has anybody got any thoughts on that? There's really not much to say other than some rumors going around price, and I don't want to jump in with that just yet. Or maybe I will. Okay.
Might as well.
Yeah. So it's strictly rumor. Like, it's not reported anywhere, but someone, the internet being the amazing machine that it is, someone started working Amazon affiliate links and stuff backwards, and working it backwards in some way. I don't know the details around it, but they found a web address that had 128 gigabyte Oculus Quest at $499. Which I think, when you hear about 64 gig and 128 gig versions, I think most people assume then that there would be a $50 premium probably on the higher storage version. But if this rumor, and I want to stress rumor, is true, then it's a $100 premium. With the Oculus Go, I initially bought the 32 gig, and after like 2 days, I saw that the 32 gigs wasn't cutting it for me, and I went back to Best Buy and did a replacement and paid the difference to the 64 gig. But that was a $50 price difference. I don't know about a $100 price difference here. Thinking about it, 64 gig, like, you're not going to have 64 available. Like, that once the OS and everything's on there, you're going to have like 50 or something like that available. So what do you guys think? Do you think the 64 gig is going to cut it? Or are any of you going to jump for the 128 gig version, assuming it's $100 more?
Well, Steve, think about it. Like the Oculus Go, they're offering an extra 32 gig for $50. So it only makes sense that they offer an extra 64 gig for $100, surely. No, I think anybody that would follow this, it doesn't make any sense, does it? I think if it was to go to that, there's no way I would go for the 128 gig. I would just make do with the 64 gig model. As much as, we need to wait and see how big these downloads are for each game or experiences on the device as well. But that doesn't make any sense. That $100 price difference, if it turns out to be true, doesn't make any sense to me. And there's no way I'm going to pay $100 for 64 gigabytes of storage space on this.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm going to say, like, I don't want to pay $100 extra, but I actually would. But that's just because of what we do, where we get keys, we get lots of games, and having to juggle. See, the thing is with the Oculus Go, I still have a 32 gig version. And so every time a new game comes out and it's like 5 gigs or something, or 4 gigs or whatever, and I got like all these demos and things, I gotta delete stuff. I'm playing musical chairs, and I feel like if I got the 64 gig version, the games are going to be smaller. They're not going to get gigantically huge. They're going to be similar to Go, but they're probably going to get a little bit bigger. They're not going to get up to Rift sizes. I don't think we're ever going to have like 15, 20 gig games on the Quest. I doubt that. But I think we will have like 7 gig, 8 gigs, 5, 6 gigs kind of games. And Steve makes a good point. You don't have the entire 64 gigs there. Some of that is going to be taken up with the system. And you start stacking games on top of each other, and you're going to run out of room pretty quickly. If I was a regular everyday Joe Blow guy, and you're just getting games when you like them, and you're just managing your own library, I think it's fine. Initially, you would like to have the extra storage space as well, but yeah, I guess we'll find out pretty soon.
Yeah. I personally will have to jump for 128 probably. I think a lot of people are going to feel that way, which is why Oculus would charge 100 more, because a lot of people are like, man, like if I'm getting a Quest, I need that more space. So that would be really unfortunate though, because I don't think 64 gigs is enough for most people. Like
it's probably not, but it's such a ridiculous cash grab. I mean, that's a blatant cash grab. 64 gigabytes of storage for $100.
I know.
Hey, what about this question, guys? Some people on the subreddits have said, what if there was a bundle where you get the Rift S and the Quest and you save like $100?
That'd be nice. That's not gonna happen.
The ultimate Oculus fan bundle,
That's not gonna happen. But that would be cool. I would do it as long as they got delivered day one for both of them. Yeah,
I think the bigger question with storage, and the Go has not been a good indicator, despite what Carmack has tweeted, is that there's no your own storage as a solution, right? Like he's talked about having working on it where they can unlock, where we can plug in our own micro USB storage solutions, but they've not done it. It's been coming up on a year now since the Oculus Go came out. So I have no confidence that they're going to allow at this point any sort of your own storage. Like it'd be easy to buy a 64 gig version and then you go out and buy your own card, which is the way I'd prefer to do it, but that way I'm not paying $100 for 64 gigs, which is just, a crime. But, everyone kind of plays that game,
Yeah, man, 64 gigs, that's like $2 or something, like that's ridiculous. All right, we have some other kind of tinier news stories that we can jump through. I know Anthony briefly mentioned, but Oculus confirmed cross-buy and cross-play between Rift and Quest. Thank goodness. This was something a lot of people were worried about. It's still on a developer by developer basis, but I think, most developers are going to allow for cross-buy. It just makes sense. Like, I feel like people would go after developers who don't support cross-buy and be like, you can choose to do this. Why aren't you doing this? Like, so hopefully the community around that will force cross-buy to be something.
One question I have about the cross-buy thing, and I don't know if this has been answered anywhere, but okay, for example, let's say, what's a good example here? Like, think of some game that you have right now, like Subnautica. Okay, for example, it's a bad example, but let's just say, okay, so Subnautica, you already own Subnautica. Somehow you bought it on the Oculus Store, if it's even on the Oculus Store, and it's never been announced for Quest for a long time, but like a year from now, it comes out on Quest. Do you get cross-buy for that?
So, I think that's still to be completely determined, but the terminology used was games can be recognized and unlocked for both. So it sounds like there is some software layer, something in the storefronts in the ecosystem somewhere that says, oh, you have Beat Saber already on your Oculus account. It's just going to auto recognize and be unlocked for you on your Quest, so long as the developer has supported that option. Ruben was quoted as saying that he expects that most will support cross-buy. So to me, it sounds like it sounds like most will support cross-buy. It sounds like exactly what he said. So to me, I think this is very, very, very good news. Like probably the most positive in my mind to come out of GDC as a whole, in that this isn't just a minor afterthought. Weeks ago, I was on a rant, and I don't really rant that often, I don't think, but I was perturbed at the notion that I'd have to buy Beat Saber again on the Oculus Quest. I was perturbed at that. And this sounds like now that I won't. It sounds like that, our press account where we have a lot of keys and stuff, like right out of the gate, day one, we're going to be able to try out a lot of stuff on the Quest. It sounds like, and of course we don't know.
Yeah, that sounds almost too good to be true. We'd like Pixel Ripped 1989, all these games we'd have on there. That almost seems too good to be true to me.
Yeah, but hopefully that's the case. And also there's the Crossplay, which is kind of neat. Like a game like Dead and Buried that you played, Anthony, you'll be able to, like, you know, my son will be in the Quest and I can be on the Rift or whatever. I think that's a pretty good thing too.
That's actually a really good thing, because think about, one of the things I've always harped on is in VR land, we don't really have like co-op, like couch co-op type things, you know, playing in the same room and stuff. And you could conceivably, if you have a Quest and you have a Rift or a Rift S, you know, your son could be over there and he's playing the game and you're playing the game, and you can kind of be in the same area. You just make sure your guardians are not interfering with each other and you're crashing into each other. But that's super cool, I think.
Yeah, that is super cool. Any game that supports crossplay is going to be awesome. I think most likely, though, it won't be like, okay, you can be logged into the same account on both. You'll probably have to buy it twice.
Yes, that's what I'm assuming, because yeah, you can't have VR Roundtable on Quest and VR Roundtable playing against each other on Rift. Like, I don't know how the servers would handle that, so I'm assuming you'll have to have 2 copies of the game to do that. But still, the option's there.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's there's options even that with developers. They can set up their own account within game, so you can have your two account Oculus accounts and then 2 separate game accounts, and they could manipulate it that way, I suppose, in some ways. But I don't know. I don't know. We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, definitely better positive spin than it has been lately. It's been really negative, like, oh man, we have to rebuy everything, this is gonna suck. But sounds like, thank goodness, that's not what's happening. Originally that was the thought. All right, we can briefly touch on HP Reverb. This is kind of what Rift S should have been, right? That's like what everyone says when they talk about the HP Reverb. It's a $599 Windows MR headset with 2160 by 2160 per eye, which is pretty insane. And it has a reported 114-degree field of view, which is a little bit higher than Rift and Vive. It really just looks like a Rift, but it's not. It's an HP Reverb. So we can go around and have people talk about this. Gary, do you want to start?
Yeah. So when this was first announced, it was at the beginning of GDC. I think it was on the Monday certainly before the Rift S was announced anyway. But yeah, this looked really, really good. So it's got an LCD screen, so 2160 by 2160 per eye. This is the thing, Anthony, you always talk about 2160 by 2160 per eye. So I'm thinking this could be the headset for you. But it's limited in some ways. There are limitations with it. So it's still using LCD display. It's not got a mechanical IPD adjustment or anything like that. But it's got a slightly bigger field of view than we're used to. And yeah, by all accounts, it's a very comfortable headset. I suppose the biggest limitation is the Windows Mixed Reality tracking. I don't have a big problem with this. I really don't. And this is a headset I've got my eye on because it's coming out next month. It's coming out pretty soon as well. So if I pick up, I will be picking up a Rift S and an Oculus Quest. I don't know if I can afford to pick this one up as well, but I probably would like to, because the tracking really doesn't bother me too much. And if I can experience a 2160 by 2160 per eye headset, then that would be great. Even if my 1080 Ti can't necessarily support that kind of resolution natively, at least I can reduce the screen door effect and hopefully get some kind of better experience in something like Elite Dangerous. The only concern, and before I pass it over to somebody else, I suppose the only concern, whenever I see this headset positioned, like spoken about by people that have been speaking about it, is the fact that it seems to be aimed more towards like desktop application uses, and they do have like an enterprise version of it as well, which is a little bit more expensive. But they seem to be focusing more on like simulator-based applications, so racing games and flight simulators, and also just desktop uses for VR as well, rather than being an all-round solution for VR applications like standing VR applications, which confuses me because most Windows mixed reality headsets are specifically placed in that realm alongside the Rift and the Vive. But this one, for whatever reason, they seem to be taking a slightly different angle on it. But yeah, I'm still tempted. I'm still really interested to see some impressions of it. I don't know if I won't be a day one buyer of it, but yeah, interested nevertheless.
Yeah, Steve, what are your thoughts?
Well, so I've kind of thought in this last several weeks that, the Pimax is my daily driver, and I'm like, okay, well, I need a backup for the Pimax. Everyone knows why. And right now I have a Rift and I have an Odyssey. I'm like, well, I'll sell both of those and I'll get the Rift S. And then we got the news of the Rift S. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, maybe that's not the best decision for me. Maybe I'll do this HP Reverb. But it's got some, I don't know that I want my backup to be limited just to Windows MR. So I'm thinking all in all, I'm sort of in Gary's frame of mind. I might go Rift S because I think I want to have touch controllers with Knuckles often may never come outland timetable. Like, I want to have touch controllers at my disposal. I want to know that I have native support for what I think are going to be basically the best games in VR this year with Asgard's Wrath and Stormland and so on. So I'm leaning more towards Rift S, but I'm very, very, very tempted by this HP Reverb purely because of the pixel density. The 2160 by 2160. First of all, like most of these panels in a lot of VR headsets, they're not symmetric horizontal and vertical resolution per eye, but yet this one is. I find that interesting. Why is it 2160 by 2160? But either way, the density is very, very interesting. I want to try one. I think it'll make a great headset for sim use, because you don't have to deal with the tracking. Unfortunately, it comes with the original Windows mixed reality controllers. There's no IPD adjustment, which is another kind of head scratcher because they actually have separate displays per eye in this headset, unlike the Rift S, which is bound by the single fixed display. So this is an interesting decision. But if those lenses are better and the range of IPD can still hit the sweet spot of the lenses, maybe the IPD isn't as big an issue here. I don't know, but I do think I remember hearing that the lenses were very nice in this headset. So it's something else to consider, Gary. I know you're sort of a stickler now, a harsh critic of lenses. So all in all, like my take on the HP Reverb is, on paper, it's very interesting and I'm very tempted. And it may be my Pimax backup. But at the same time, I'm not 100% sure yet. I would love to try one and see. And it goes back sort of to a bigger picture. Anthony, I think you've mentioned this before, and that you don't think it's right to buy something and return it. Well, I can't go to the store and try this out. Like, I think it's right that I go to Amazon and buy it. And if they can motivate me, if the damn thing is so nice that I'm not tempted to return it, then it means they've earned the sale, that it's a good product. So this may be something that I do the buy and try, and maybe too tempted to not return it, that sort of thing, because as far as I know, I'm not going to be able to try this out at a store. If I can go to a store somewhere and try it out, then of course I won't tie my money up with Amazon. But yeah, this one's very exciting because there's nothing like it in terms of pixel density. Nothing even close. The Pimax isn't close to this. Pimax has 25 something horizontal by 1440 vertical, and that's spread over a wide field of view. The Pimax is clear. The Pimax looks great. I'm happy with the Pimax, but this looks like it takes it to an extremely higher level, which has me pretty excited to try it.
Yeah, it's exciting. Anthony, what are your thoughts on the Reverb?
My thoughts are, damn it, I was there and there was a Microsoft booth and I had no idea. I didn't find out until I think I had already gotten back to Sacramento, and then I was like reading something in there and it was like, the Reverb is there. I'm like, what? The Reverb is there? I had no idea the Reverb was there. But yeah, so my thoughts on this, it's $200 more than the Rift S. So why wouldn't you pay $200 more to jump up to an entirely new level of resolution? And yeah, the downers, the original controllers, original Windows mixed reality tracking, the no IPD thing, which is very weird considering the two screens and all that. I'm conflicted, man. I'm conflicted because I want a next gen headset. But one of the other downsides we have to remember, see, Steve doesn't have to worry about this. He's got a 2080 Ti. But those of us that don't have a 2080 Ti, you jump up to this Reverb, you probably need to grab a new video card while you're at it. So then, that's a whole nother ball of wax that you get into as well as there. And then the other thing I was thinking about Reverb, like just imagine this. If you've got a seated controller based game, the Reverb is the way to go. Like if you're watching like the Great Sea from Secret Location or Spheres or something like that, you probably want to do it on the Reverb. And if you're playing a driving game or a racing game and you got a wheel and you're using your Reverb, that's awesome as well. And then as bad as the Windows mixed reality controllers may be, and like as the first generation of their tracking is not the greatest, but is it that bad? Like, is the trade-off worth it? The 2160 by 2160. I think the key factor here is we're waiting on Cosmos. And in a couple of, well, like tomorrow or later tomorrow, they're doing a show in China, the Vive Ecosystem Conference. Maybe we'll get some, like we haven't even been confirmed that it's 2160 by 2160 in the Cosmos. We think it is because it's so similar to that reference Qualcomm design that is 2160 by 2160, but it's still kind of confusing. So I don't know, man. I'm conflicted. I really am.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, go ahead.
Paoli Triani in chat said HP Reverb is like the gentleman's club, and the Rift S is like a school playground.
But here's the thing: is like, let's say Rift S was $599, we'd all be upset. We'd all be so frustrated, and also we'd be like, "Oh man, now I need a new video card." Now, or at least I would be. So end of the day, I think Oculus made the right choice here to make something that isn't this expensive, and also you need a new video card. I wouldn't have bought a Rift S if I had to get a new video card and all that. I just don't have that kind of money. I want a new headset. I don't want to get a whole new PC yet. So, I mean, it just comes to yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like I never once thought a Rift S would be this high pixel density. I have a 2080 Ti, as Anthony mentioned, and I would struggle to run this HP headset at the performance that I would like. I don't think most people have done the math and just realize what this density is. This is a good 25-30% beyond the Pimax. Like, this is an insane density. Like, I don't think anyone's going to be running this thing at 90 hertz unless it's a very basic game, like maybe a game like Beat Saber or Dick Wild. Those things probably run fine on something like a 1080. I think someone in chat mentioned 1080 is what HP is saying is sort of the baseline minimum. But your games like Skyrim and Elite Dangerous, like, I mean, this is 45 hertz reprojection all day, every day. And maybe it's fine then with a 1080 Ti, knowing that you're not going to be hitting 90 frames. But yeah, this is... Go ahead.
There are still obviously advantages we spoke about before to just having the high resolution screen and undersampling the games so your graphics card can deal with it. You get lower screen door effects and you still get a clearer image overall. I mean, I suppose the question then is that really worth the money to pay for these high resolution screens if you're simply undersampling it and just getting lower screen door effects? That's the big question. But before we move on, with all of these headsets, I wanted to ask everybody, and I meant to do it a little bit earlier, but it's probably best to do it now we've discussed them all. So, like the Rift S, we've got the Rift S, we've got the HP Reverb, and the Cosmos, which we really don't know too much about, unfortunately, at the moment. But if you were to sort of have unlimited funds and the best graphics card out there, which one would be the one HMD that each of you would purchase? Just offhand, you're not held to this or anything. What do you think, Chris?
So, I guess throwing all that, I have infinite funds and stuff, kind of makes it harder because I don't really. But I think just touch controllers are so underappreciated in the overall VR industry. So even though HP Reverb looks so good as a headset, I can't with those controllers, and like I need touch controllers. So at the end of the day, I'm gonna have to get a Rift S just because they're so vastly superior to anything, which doesn't make any sense. It's been years. It's been like, like a year or two. Why can't somebody make a controller as good as this? So that's my answer to your question. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that's a really good point. And one thing I wanted to touch on with the Rift S as well is about the ecosystem of Oculus, and not a lot of people like this. The fact that you've got some of the best games are being released exclusively on the Oculus platform. That plays a big role in terms of what headset I want to use, but not to take anything away from what you were saying there, Chris, about the touch controllers. The controllers are a huge deal for me as well. Anthony, what did you think? Like, out of all of these headsets?
Well, if I had a 2080 Ti, I mean, if I didn't have to buy a 2080 Ti, I would be. I'm definitely leaning towards these 2160 by 2160s. But you do need this new video card. The other factor that I need to admit, I've never owned a Windows mixed reality headset. So I've never even tried one. So I don't know exactly how crappy the controllers are. I don't know if are the controllers like Vive Wand crappy, or are they even worse than that?
They're better. I think
better than that.
I think they're better than Vive and better than Move.
See, I could definitely better than Move. Move was but yeah, I think I could probably deal with it. I think I could, I would buy the Reverb knowing that it doesn't fulfill all the wants that I have, but it's kind of like a stopgap. I want that higher res. I want to see something different.
Steve, what about you? Out of all these, Cosmos, Reverb, or Rift S, if you had to choose one?
If I have to choose one right now, I mean, Cosmos isn't in contention because we don't know anything about it. Really.
Yeah.
So between the Rift S and the Reverb, if I have to choose one, I choose Rift S because of the ecosystem. Because when I get a game on the Rift S, I get it for the Quest. Because I have touch controllers, and because I feel like, as a big VR enthusiast that really loves playing high fidelity content, I feel like I have to have one foot in the door of the Oculus ecosystem. And you can say that proves that their method is working. I've said it probably 2 or 3 times on the show already. Like, the Pimax is my favorite. It's my daily driver, but I'm feeling compelled to have one toe still planted in the Oculus ecosystem. And it's because of those touch controllers. It's because Knuckles is God knows where it's at. And it's because games like Stormland and Asgard's Wrath, I don't know what that experience is going to be like on the Pimax. I don't know that I'm going to like playing Stormland as much as I may like the visuals of the Pimax with freaking Vive wands. So if my answer could be that the HP Reverb with Knuckles controllers somehow, or Pimax with Knuckles controllers, and then I use Revive to play Asgard's Wrath, that would sort of be my choice, and it's what I'd prefer to do, but I feel constrained. So between those headsets, I'll have to say Rift S.
You've got an issue here. So I agree. You've got ecosystem, but you've got the touch controllers, which play a big part of it as well. And also, you see, people have compared Oculus to the Apple of VR, and I think that's a legitimate argument. I really do. I've subscribed to Apple Music. I'm now invested in the Apple ecosystem. I don't want to move away from my iPhone because I've got Apple Music and everything's great. I've got all these playlists set up, and this is the problem. So you have Oculus, who give ASW, they give you the touch controllers, they give you all of these big games, and it's very difficult once you're invested in that ecosystem. That plays a huge role in going forward in all of this stuff. And when I tried the Odyssey Plus, I could play the Oculus games, I could play Steam VR games, but they weren't working quite as well as when I used my Rift. And this plays a big factor as well. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but it's just the way it is. And as a consumer, it's something that plays a big part in what my purchase is.
An interesting factor too that I just realized in this last 10 minutes here is the beauty of Crossbuy and what it does for Oculus. Because think about this now. If you own a Quest, you're always going to have that in the back of your mind. Should I buy this game on Steam, or should I buy it on the Oculus store because I might get a free Quest version down the road? that is a tricky little move that Oculus made there.
Hell yeah, that's what I was
right
saying
one.
weeks ago when I was going off about platform and the whole stack and everything. I was like, this is a massive, it's a huge, huge, huge deal. When Zuckerberg goes out on stage and he's like, I want to get to 1 billion people. Here's Go, here's Rift. Oh, and today we're announcing Quest. Like when he showed that, like the story in my mind was to amplify this thing and say, look, all right, here you go. The software should play together. The game should all play together. Go's a little bit different, but I would argue that having Ken and Blaze Rush on Go should mean that I get it on my Quest and I get it on the Rift. Like that's all got to tie together, and that gives them a huge, huge advantage over all of the competition. And it seems like they're leveraging it. It's manifesting here right now with us. It's manifesting right now. We're compelled to stay with the Rift S in some ways, even though we felt that the headset itself was very ho-hum, that it was a net wash and everything. We still feel that compulsion. And yeah, that's exactly what Oculus intended. And I don't necessarily think they're wrong.
Yeah. Oh man, what a time! What a time to be in VR, huh? Do we want to talk about the Pico Neo 2, or I don't even know what this is.
What's our runtime here? I mean, we're pushing more than
2.5 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's not a lot to say on anything else that we've got down here, honestly. But I'm okay to stay on for another 10-15 minutes if people want to carry on.
Well, do we want Anthony to talk about the Rift S games he played briefly? Because I don't think we've discussed that.
Yeah, that's good.
Maybe if you want.
Well, I could talk real quick just about Dead and Buried 2 in general. Like, I'm not that impressed with what I've seen from Dead and Buried 2. But what I will say is all I've seen is one multiplayer map. Okay, so we've got to assume that there's multiple modes to Dead and Buried 2. And one of the things is when you're running around Dead and Buried 2, you see on the wall, it says Oculus Strike Team. And the original Dead and Buried was a collaboration between Oculus Studios and Gunfire Games. And I don't think Gunfire Games is I mean, if I had to bet money, I'd say they're probably not working on this. I think Oculus Strike Team is doing it by themselves. And I don't know. I'm not super hyped on Dead and Buried 2 but I'm not a multiplayer guy. See, I'd much rather do like I'm not like a multiplayer Quake guy. And that's kind of what it was to me. And it wasn't like I played Dead and Buried 2 on the Rift S. I played the actual PC VR version of it, and nothing about it seemed nothing about like Contractors has nothing to worry about is what I'm trying to say here. You know what I mean? Like this is not your go-to for a Quake game, in my opinion, based on what I saw. Now, if the game has like single player content and co-op content where you're going up against waves and stuff like that, it could be a totally different ball game. The other game I played, Stormland. Oh my goodness, this is the game. It is our #1 most wanted game on VR game rankings in the PC category, and for good reason. This thing is awesome. I really just wanted to stay in that experience, and I really wanted to have headphones on my head and not hear any background noise. I mean, I was looking at my robot hands, and it was just the inverse kinematics were so on point. And this is Insomniac Games. They've already done like 4 or 5 VR games. So they have that level of experience. And when I first started off in Stormlands, you're in an overcast, it's like raining, it's kind of dreary, everything's muddy and drab, and there's no color or anything. And so it kind of starts off like that, but you get a little bit further out, and then bam, you get into bright sunlight, and it's bright sunlight everywhere, and everything's so more vivid and colorful. And you see these echoes of all the previous robots that were there. And so you get like these flashback things that are going on. Stormland looks damn good. Sebastian was saying Stormland is going to be out the day the Rift S is. I think he probably got some bad information from somebody, but Stormland looks really good. I could have. See, the thing is, if I was there an extra day, I would have tried Asgard's Wrath. I would have tried Vacation Simulator. Man.
I hope I'll get to try them and let everybody know next week, unless they don't have any of those at PAX East. We'll find out. It'll be a lot for one day, though. I'm just going to like drive there.
They'll
I don't
probably
know.
have the same demos, but it's going to be, you're going to be playing the line game. It's like, which line do you jump into first, you know?
Yeah, it's gonna
Maybe
be rough.
maybe make some noise, let people know you're in the media. So they treated Anthony different when they saw that media tag. So maybe if they think you're some major social influencer for VR, which you are because you're on the show, then you know, maybe you can pull that card and skip the line a little bit.
That'd be nice. That'd be nice. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before the show ends, or is that everything?
One last thing I'll say is Final Assault is available, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great game, and oh my God, is it buried? Because like Steve and Gary, this is your game of the year, right, for 2019 so far? Is there any game that is released this year that is better than Final Assault? I mean, I put it up there with, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, it's on the list. It's definitely on the list. I love this game, and I don't understand how it's getting buried. I think this should be, everybody should be talking about this game. I think it's great.
I agree. I think Final Assault is really good, and it's going to get a lot of comparisons to Brass Tactics because of the nature of the game and everything. But I think it's different. I think the way you have to be more actively involved and grabbing the planes and moving, you got to move around more. Brass Tactics was more strategic focus. You were a little more relaxed, a little more subdued. Whereas Final Assault, it's almost like you're one of the troop units yourself. You're kind of, it's a little more hectic. And, I think that gives them a good dichotomy so that they're not exactly an apples to apples comparison. But I think Final Assault's pretty great. And I agree that I think it's kind of gotten buried by the, the Rift S sucks, here's why post and Reddit over and over and over. It's buried by all the YouTube channels, ourselves included. We don't have Final Assault on our cover today. So yeah, they probably didn't time release too well, but it's worth picking up.
It's probably worth mentioning as well, because sometimes I look back on these episodes and it looks like we're advertising games when we really don't mean to, but we only had access to the beta. We've not been even given the key to Final Assault. So we're saying this off the back of the fact that we got into the beta and we were just playing it on that. We have no investment in Final Assault at all. So make your own decision. If you like Brass Tactics, then I think you've got a place for Final Assault in your game collection as well.
Honestly, I think that's a good point, Gary. Just in talking before, as we come to a close and everything we've said on the Rift S, we're not paid by anything. Like we get super chats from you and we get some ad revenue from YouTube. That's it. We get keys given to us, some developers, but, unlike a lot of people, there's a lot of people out there that get flown around the world by Oculus or get flown around the world by Microsoft, whatever. There's lots of paid advertisements and such. And, I think it's important to say that, it's particularly since we had the stigma of Rifters Roundtable, the fallout from when we all sold our Vives and bought Rifts. Oculus doesn't give us anything. Like they don't even give us games. Like we get them from the developers, and that's very different. A lot of people in the community are influenced in some ways directly by Oculus, directly by Sony, whatever, some of these companies. And I think it's important that people understand that we aren't we get almost nothing for doing the show, and other than the enjoyment of doing it. So it's worth throwing out there in all of this Rift S talk. I don't want anybody thinking that, well, they didn't beat the Rift S up because they're paid Oculus shills. No, we didn't beat it up because it's our true thoughts. I mean, we don't love it, we don't hate it, and our thoughts are our own, and we are not paid in any way for our opinions by Oculus.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing to highlight. We're the most unbiased we could possibly be, other than our own biases of liking VR and liking the headsets we like. All right. So that being said, that was episode 118 of VR Roundtable. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Leave the video a like if you enjoyed it, and leave reviews on iTunes or wherever you are listening to this podcast. If you're listening to the audio version, we really appreciate that. And we're going to see you all next week. Same time, same place, for some hopefully more discussion on some other stuff and other news that happens at PAX East as well. So big time for VR. Exciting to be a part of it. So we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.